Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of our podcast that we're trying out. We're the Webtoon Canvas creator duo Pyrrhic Victoria. I'm Pyrrhic.
And I'm Victoria.
And so we just wanted to start a podcast from the perspective of two creators who are trying to get into the Webtoon scene. And we just wanted to start this series where we talk about art and storytelling and what we take away from the creative process, and then our observations for a variety of different media. So without further ado, this is the first episode.
And we decided to tackle the number one webtoon on the internet.
Yeah.
I guess on the international platform, Webtoon, which is Olympus. So this could either go really well or it could go really badly.
Yeah.
But we'll see as we go along.
Yeah, I mean, so we just want to make sure that we kind of get across our opinions and our thoughts and our takeaways in a way that is salient and understanding and like in a way that makes sense. You know, it's just like the opinions of two people. You've read it before. How many times? Like,
I've read Olympus about twice, but it wasn't with as much attention as I have been recently, because, you know, there was a community recently launched on Reddit, Unpopular Olympus. I found a lot of the dialogue around Olympus just in general, just speaking of the broad discourse around Olympus, to be pretty polarizing. Either people really hated it or they really loved it, and there wasn't a lot of critical, unbiased discussion around Olympus and what it means for the webcomics industry. I think there's a lot of really interesting things going on with webcomics right now, especially with Webtoon, with all of the stuff that's coming out about creators on the platform. And I think it would be really interesting to cover the top Webtoons on that platform, how they're going, Olympus, Let's Play, Unordinary, True Beauty. These are all, 3-4 years in to their run. And especially with Olympus recently, the discourse has kind of become more negative. And again, as an artist, we're both artists here. We both have our own webtoons, and we're both trying to launch webtoons as this firestorm is happening. It's really interesting to kind of document not only the beginning of Olympus, its rise, and then kind of steady state season 2, and then also the controversy surrounding season 3. To be clear, again, both of our opinions, we're not going to talk about the creator here or really gossip.
Yeah, no.
But a lot of it is just what we think of the webtoon as two artists who've read a lot of comics. We've both been reading comics for decades at this point. Not to reveal our ages here.
Decades. Decades is kind of a long,
At least a decade and a half.
Yeah.
at least decades for me.
80
maybe.
years, probably,
yeah,
right?
100 years. Almost a century.
Yeah.
But yeah, so without further ado, let's get into it. I think this is the first episode in who knows how many episodes. We're planning for 3, maybe 4, depending on how long the discourse goes. But it's going to be pretty casual. We were rereading the series. She's never read it before. I've read it twice over the years. Since 2020 was when I first encountered Olympus, and that was when I first tried to launch my own webtoon, which was a colossal failure. So yeah, I'm in my second reread, and I'm reading it far more critically than I had previously. And this episode will be discussing the kind of backstory behind the creation of Olympus, and the first 70 episodes. I reread the first 70 episodes, she read the first 70 episodes, and just kind of covering our opinion on it from a storytelling perspective, from an art perspective, and yeah, covering the development.
Yeah, and then also it's interesting as well to look at it, because if you're trying to get into the position where you can make Webtoon like a career, right? And you're trying to think of ways to make a series that you can monetize on, there's definitely a way to look at Olympus from a financial and corporate perspective as well, right?
Oh yeah, it's a smash hit. It's a New York Times bestseller. I think the 3rd print volume is coming out early next year. The first 2 print volumes came out, and it's a New York Times bestseller. It's won awards for its storytelling. There's advertisements for Olympus specifically. It's kind of one of the biggest flagship series in international, when you talk about international advertising for the platform Webtoon, they've got it plastered all over New York City, you know, Times Square. It's
California as well.
California. Yeah. It's a very big series, and I think just discussing it in light of what contributed to its rise, why it became popular, like what elements led to it becoming popular from our perspectives, you know, I think that's a very valuable thing to also bring up, because, you know, spoiler alert, neither of us really have the most positive opinion of Lore Olympus.
Yeah, that's putting it delicately. Basically, you mentioned that you'd read it twice. I had never read it before. I kind of blitzed through the first 70 chapters in like 2 days, only a couple hours really, so I couldn't take everything in. I was a lot slower with my my note taking and my reading at first because I wanted to jot everything down. But to me, it's almost like the number one thing I'm interested in is like, why do people like the series so much? And then after reading it, I'm like, do people actually like the series so much, or is it more of like a time and place type thing?
Right.
And so that's like what I want to get out of this discussion as well. I think we can answer all those questions, but yeah, to put it lightly, and obviously we don't want to be too inflammatory here. We don't want to like
hate on the creator.
Yeah, we're not going to hate on the creator. We're not going to hate on the series, because you can't deny the success, and you can't deny that there's something there, right? But it's kind of a thing where it's like, you know, when you watch the first Halloween movie by John Carpenter, that's like the movie that started it all, right, for like horror movies and slasher movies, right? But you watch it as somebody in 2022 when you have all these other great movies, and you're like, really? Halloween? Like, this is the movie that's considered iconic? It's not that good. But It's like, at the time, there really wasn't anything else like that. It was like the first of its kind, and that's why it was so good.
Or Seinfeld. It's the Seinfeld effect.
Yeah, Seinfeld as well. And so that definitely comes into the contribution of the discussion. And obviously, like, the experience in the past couple months of creating my own webtoon, like, when I read her comic, I'm like, dude, I can see she's struggling with the same things that I was struggling with when it comes to writing and pacing and plotting. The only thing is, because it was such an early webcomic, she didn't really have the framework to go off of to increase the quality in some aspects of the writing.
To put it bluntly, you can tell that the creator of Lore Olympus doesn't really have a lot of background as a consumer of comics. Not to come off snobby or anything, but again, decades of comic reading consumption.
Yeah.
Mostly Japanese manga, and I've just learned so much from that. And I think it's partly the creator and partly the consumer. You know, a lot of the consumers of Webtoon, you know, they read Webtoons, they don't really read anything else. And now that it's 2022, we have so many series, and there's much more competition when it comes to, you know, Lore Olympus, Let's Play, Unordinary, et al. You know, people, their palates have refined. It's the same thing like what you were saying with movies. The American audience's palate has refined as they're exposed to more and more media of the kind. So I think it's definitely a time and place thing, like you said, and I think that will kick us off into the development of Lore Olympus. So basically, as we were saying, it's definitely a time and place thing. I believe Webtoons in general became a thing in Korea in the 2010s, and the most famous examples of early Webtoons are Noblesse. Yeah, I know that one for sure, which was launched in the 2010s. The Korean market and the Japanese market for Webtoons in general is probably 10 years ahead of the US market. So Webtoons are a much bigger thing there. They have a much greater audience, have a much greater pipeline from Webtoon to Korean drama, or Webtoon to movie. And there's much more opportunities for monetization. It's a much more mature industry over there. Over here, it's quite new, and I think Webtoons rose to prominence in America or on the international English language app largely in 2018, and that was when Lore Olympus was signed as a Webtoon original. So the creator of Lore Olympus is Rachel Smythe. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce her last name, but that's how it looks. She's a person from New Zealand, and she's the creator of Lore Olympus. She has a background, it's important to state, in graphic design. So I think that was largely instrumental in informing her aesthetic for the early chapters of Lore Olympus. And I'm just going to get it out of the way here. I think the art specifically for chapters maybe 20 to 70, basically the first half of season 1. In some panels it's really, really phenomenal. In terms of composition and color, you don't really see anything else like it on Webtoon. And I think that was largely informed by her background, but also by her influences. She's clearly very influenced by Disney, 1950s Disney. I think specifically, I believe the artist's name is Mary Blair. The Mary Blair, who was the concept artist on Alice in Wonderland, Cinderella, and other famous Disney classics. You can see that a lot with her approach to composition, her approach to backgrounds, and her color choice. It's very stylized, hyper stylized, and yet minimalistic in a way that is very pleasing to the eye and yet easy to render. So she's kind of hit the sweet spot when it comes to her art design, and I think that was because she has that background, in adjacent to the arts. So she used that in her comic heavily, and then that was her influence when it came to the art design. She specifically names Mary Blair. I believe she started posting her comic, early Lore Olympus. I don't know how many chapters existed on Tumblr before she was signed to Webtoon Original, but I believe I've seen elsewhere that quite a few, I would say she got fairly far in the comic storyline on Tumblr before she relaunched on Webtoon and redid all those chapters, and her art actually matured a lot from the jump from Tumblr to Webtoon. She stated that she could not draw characters before she went to Webtoon, and she adopted this paper doll style, which, ironically is very, very iconic and very aesthetic, despite her using it, supposedly as a shortcoming or a crutch for her poor technical ability. She was signed as a Webtoon original in 2018, so she's been a Webtoon original creator for basically almost 5 years now, and Lore Olympus has been posting, on a weekly schedule. We're on episode 210 is the latest episode. So it's been running for 4 years, almost 5 years, and 210 episodes. And crucially, we've just entered the 3rd season, and it's the final arc. We're in the final stretches of Lore Olympus. I believe this is the last season. So I think it's too early to state what the ending will be, obviously, because we haven't gotten there yet. But I think it's mature enough that you could reach a conclusion as to, how that's going to pan out.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to kind of speculate as to where the story is going, because when I was reading this, I was trying to keep track of the things that were being set up and then how they were paying off later, or how you would expect them to pay off later based on what she had set up in earlier chapters. But it was becoming increasingly difficult for me to do that because it looks like throughout the series, she kind of structures her story writing around specific interactions that she wants to have, mainly between Hades and Persephone. Mm-hmm. And she just kind of structures the story around that and then figures out how to get there in a way that doesn't necessarily make for good storytelling, but in a way that kind of makes things overly convoluted, right?
Yeah, and I think her approach to storytelling has become, or it's very obvious that her approach to storytelling is very unplanned. She focuses a lot on smaller details, like specific scenes, more so than she does on individual storylines and plots and having them all come together in a satisfying way. So just going back to the introduction a bit, she said that, I think it's important to note specifically that she worked on the comic herself. The first about 59, 60 episodes of Lore Olympus, she was the sole artist. And I noticed around episode 59, she started having assistants credited for Lore Olympus. So she has, in 2022, we're on episode 210. At this point, she has 4 full-time assistants helping her create the comic. And the rumor is that she's responsible for running the story and the writing, primary writer and story lead. And she also produces the roughs for each chapter on a weekly basis.
And so by the roughs, you mean like the thumbnails. Basically, the roughs are going to be the sketches, the order of events, and the script, presumably.
Oh yeah, she's basically, you know, writing the script. She runs the story, so she determines where the story's going on a weekly basis, and then, you know, 40,000 foot view. And then by the roughs, I do mean like the storyboard. So that would be panel by panel, the sketches for each panel. But that's a rumor. I don't know to what degree that's confirmed, but I will just say, you know, as somebody who's read all 210 chapters, and I've been keeping up with it weekly for off and on for about 2 years, it's very obvious that she is not as involved in the art process anymore in the later chapters. I mean, we're going to get to that when we get to those chapters, but that was another development thing. She's also stated on the story that the story of Lore Olympus is meant to be a deconstruction. And here's a direct quote. So it's basically looking at particular genres and kind of twisting them a little bit. So I've kind of got the monster boyfriend genre, and there's a plot line at the moment where like Hades is much older than Persephone, and you know, it's a little like ugh kind of thing. This is something that we see in movies and stories a lot. It's like you'll have a female character, and then you'll have the main male character who's very old and wise, and they're like, I know so much more than you because I'm very, very old. So it's looking at the framing of those sorts of cultural tropes and twisting it up a little and observing it, and kind of having a bit of a laugh with everyone, especially with my character Persephone. She's a very soft protagonist. I basically designed her in such a way that I wanted her to be relatable for people, especially young women, because I feel like there's a lot of media where they have a strong female character, and they're really good at doing backflips and stabbing people and saving everyone from totalitarian societies and things. And it's really cool, and there's definitely a place for that, and it's super important. But I also think we need representation for softer people who their idea of having a breakthrough is just verbally learning how to stand up for themselves. Things like that, just little relatable things. So, does that remind you of Lana Del Rey?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, thinking Lana Del Rey. And you know, to be honest, like there were some parts that I did see a little bit of relatability in Persephone, right? Like, there's like a scene where she goes to college, she's at her college class, and she's really smart.
Yeah.
And, you know, somebody says, wow, you know, like you got a really good score, and she goes, well, if you had difficulty understanding the subject material, I could tutor you sometime if you want.
Mm-hmm.
I've done that before, that was relatable to me. But then I think around the same time frame in the story, they reveal that she's the heiress to the barley mother fortune.
Mm-hmm.
And every single character in this comic is like absurdly wealthy, and they have no like problems where they're dealing with like the plight of the working class, you know, and having to actually like face real hardship and real struggle. Like it's very much like Keeping Up with the Kardashians level of rich people problems.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I think just to cover the story in general, so the story of Lore Olympus is, it's supposedly, in theory, it was supposed to cover, Rachel had said that she wanted to cover all of Greek mythology, not just the story of Hades and Persephone, but I think she underestimated the degree to which she could reasonably include that without going into a bunch of different tangents and how to tie up those storylines all together.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, we have a little bit of Eros and Psyche, their mythological tale, but the majority of the story as of episode 210 is largely concerned with Hades and Persephone, with Persephone being the main character, point of view character, and Hades being her love interest. And I would classify Lore Olympus as a fantasy romance.
Yeah. So I have like detailed notes for what happens in the first 10 chapters, and then I just kind of gave up because if I tried to spend time going through detail in every single episode, it's like a waste of time because I'm trying to, you know, do the volume of 70 episodes here in 2 days. But I did notice that there were a couple of themes that were being set up in the beginning, right? So the first episode, Stag, You're It, that starts, and it kind of serves as like an introduction to the setting and the characters.
And the tone.
Yeah, the tone. And so that starts with Hades in his car, presumably outside of Minthe's apartment, and he's calling her, and he's like, where are you? You're late. And she goes, did you buy me that purse I want? And he goes, I did, but like, aren't you coming with me to the party? And she's like, nah, you know, I don't want to. So, I mean, you've got the fact that these are high society people. And I think the tagline for the series as well is like what the gods do at night or something. So
After dark.
Yeah, after dark. It's very much trying to like show these guys as high society kind of celebrities, you know, and they have their business cards and everything like that. So Hades, his brothers are Zeus and Poseidon, and Zeus is throwing a party.
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes to the party. He can't go there alone. I guess because his brothers are going to make fun of him or something. Like, there's no real
In the world of Lore Olympus, there's a lot of heteronormativity, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Hera seems to make fun of him for being single, or it's implied that Zeus and Poseidon would make fun of him for being single.
Yeah.
But it's also contradictory because later in the first 70 episodes, when he tries to bring Minthi to, I think it's Hebe's 7-year birthday party, Hera's like, why did you, like, you told him not to bring Minthi, right? But in the first episode, she's asking him where Minthi is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, but she also calls Minthi nymph trash.
Yeah.
So it's like, make up your mind.
Yeah, do you want her here, or do you not want her here?
Yeah, so...
But basically, Hades wanted to bring Minthi to the party because he didn't want to be the only single person, I guess.
Yeah, and Minthi also says something very, like, she says, you stink of death, you know?
Yeah.
And that's, like, supposed to be, like, a big, like, dramatic angst, you know?
Well, everyone keeps saying that Hades is scary and that he, like, deals with dead people and nobody likes him, but I don't really get that at all either.
Yeah, so, anyway, so, I mean, that party's going on, and then, I think it shows Artemis and Persephone, and they're getting ready for the party too, but Persephone's only got one dress. So she's like, Artemis is like, you can't go out dressed like that. You look like a relic.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, well, everybody's going to think I'm a dumb village girl. Do I really have to go?
But her dress is also the ancient Greek, I think it's called a chiton.
Could be.
I believe that's what it's called.
Yeah. It's, I think, you know, given how Hera and Zeus and Hades were dressed.
Yeah, it's a chiton.
Yeah, she could have shown up in that outfit. She would have looked great. It fits the atmosphere, but instead, in episode 2, she's wearing like a clubbing dress.
No, hot take, I actually really like the ancient Greek fashion in Lore Olympus better than I like the modern fashion.
Yeah, I thought her dress was beautiful.
I prefer the ancient, when they went to the Underworld later on, and he shows her around the river Styx, and they're dressed in the ancient Greek clothing, I actually really liked those outfits.
Yeah, so I think her first dress was really nice, but it's the only dress she owns. Meanwhile, Minthi was asking if he got that purse. So, you know, there's like...
Oh, yeah, there's already a dichotomy being set up. Yeah. And Minthi is wearing all black lingerie, and Persephone is wearing an all-white ensemble.
Yeah.
And Minthi is deep red, but Persephone is bright pink.
Yeah. So, I mean, and then in the next episode, she goes to the party. The next episode's called Who Is She? And she looks very uncomfortable. She's, like, trying to pull her dress down to cover herself and everything like that. There's a couple confusing sequences in the paneling and the art. This is like, it was difficult for me to get through the first 10 chapters because I don't think she was in the swing of visual storytelling yet, because there's some panels where it's like they cut from one panel to another and it's like, you know, I can't really tell what's going on here. Like,
yeah, I would say the first 10 chapters are pretty rough. I would say art-wise, the art stabilizes around chapter 20 to 70 is the best art.
Yeah. That Who Is She, that party sequence goes on for, I think, a couple episodes. I think it's a 3-parter. And so they talk about her backstory in the 3rd episode, about how she's raised in the mortal realm. Mm-hmm. Her mother, Demeter, is how you pronounce her name? Yeah, Demeter. Right? I kept reading it as Demeter, but...
I believe it's Demeter.
Yeah. You know, I'll defer to your expertise. And so Hades, you know, he's like having a real hard time after he sees her. He's like clutching his heart, you know, for a couple panels. Like the old ticker is gonna give out because she's just so beautiful.
Because he's so old.
That's what I was thinking.
Oh, it is Demeter.
Yeah,
but I think Demeter sounds better.
Well, I'm just gonna call her Demeter because that's how I thought of it, as Demeter. And so, yeah, so Demeter is very protective, and then I think Zeus and Poseidon are talking to Hades about how Demeter is very protective. And then immediately cut to Hades, like, kind of glaring at her behind his glasses, you know? Mm-hmm. And there's that 3-panel thing where she does, like, the diagonal 3 panels. And the first panel, it's from Hades' perspective, is her lips. The second one is, like, the S-line, they call it, of her back. And then the third one is her, like, huge hourglass figure. And it's like... bro, you know, like, whoa, man.
Something at first sight.
Yeah, like, oh, geez, he's kind of like a pervert. And then he says she puts Aphrodite to shame. And this, to me, is when the plot starts to get really convoluted. Because the logic behind Aphrodite's revenge plan for this comment doesn't make any sense to me. Because, basically, Aphrodite overhears him say she puts Aphrodite to shame. Mm-hmm. And then she calls Eros, who's her son, right? And she goes, you got to get over here right now. And so then Eros shows up. Zeus distracts Artemis to get Hades to talk to Persephone. But while Artemis is distracted, Eros comes up behind Persephone and says, "Hey kid, you want to have some real fun?" And then immediately just smash cut to her getting like super drunk on a sofa. And she goes, like, I thought meeting all these people would make me feel less alone, but I feel more alone than ever. And I'm at this point going like, yo, what's going to happen to Persephone? Like, what's going on
here?
The
unfortunate implications are pretty high at this point.
Yeah, so I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then, chapter 5, Sweet Revenge, the art starts picking up here, because this is the one that starts with her waking up. She's got that really long pink hair.
Yes, I think chapter 5 through 7 has really, really good art.
Yeah.
It has a lot of really moody compositional scenes that I like to use as examples of, like, peak Lore Olympus art. Persephone wakes up in Hades' house, and, she's surrounded by the darkness of the Underworld, and you really see the contrast between her almost neon pink color scheme and the deep, dark royal blue of the Underworld. And again, hats off to Rachel Smythe for these chapters, because you really get the moodiness of the Underworld, and that comes across with very minimalistic art, actually. It's actually like a deep teal.
Yeah. Deep
teal, there's a purple in here, and then she's got neon pink hair. There's flower petals surrounding her, so you get that she's the goddess of spring. The long hair is, like, especially when she shows it trailing, like, not only is that a really cool detail and shows how otherworldly the gods are, but it also really helps frame the composition of some of these panels, where the hair, like, kind of zigzags in and out of the frame, and the composition is framed by the hair. It's also important to note here that in the earlier chapters of Lore Olympus, the gods really seem to glow. They glow off their environment, and yeah, it's just really pretty with very, comparatively minimalist levels of detail.
Yeah.
All of the effect is delivered primarily by the color, the composition, and then a lot of the framing of the characters, how they're posing, the blocking of the scene, and by blocking I mean like where the character is standing relative to other characters or the frames. The body language is very expressive, and yeah, I would say chapter or episode
this is 5.
Episode 5 to episode probably 70-ish that we covered has a lot of sequences like this where there's just a lot of effort put into color and composition, even though it's very minimalist in terms of execution.
Yeah. And so the plan basically the reason Persephone was put into his house is because Aphrodite and Eros got her really drunk and then put her in his car, and the logic was that she's going to be really drunk and embarrass herself, and then she's going to think Hades is an old creep. And Aphrodite's like, that'll show him for comparing me to her, or saying that she's prettier than me.
I think they get her really drunk and put her in the back of Hades' car, expecting her to embarrass herself, so that when she starts, like, puking or something, then Hades will see that she's not so pretty after all.
Yeah, but they don't know, like, Hades
I know, it's extremely dangerous of a situation to put a young woman in, especially when you hear, like, a much older man remarking about how beautiful she is prior to that, and then delivering her unconscious in his car, but I think the intention was to make her to embarrass her.
Yeah, but I mean, why not have her embarrass herself at the party in front of everyone?
It was a convenient way to get them alone together.
Exactly.
So and that's a problem that keeps coming up in this series.
That's where it gets really convoluted, right? Because the plan is very convoluted, and Hades doesn't question anything. And crucially also, like, there's a sequence where he's picking her up, putting her in a bed, taking her shoe off, getting her some water, this, that, and the other, and they are, like, interacting with each other in a way that is very strange for a first time of interaction. And the top comment is saying Hades is such a gentleman, but I think a gentleman would be like, oh my goodness, I need to find Artemis and, get her...
return her to her friend.
Yeah, like
because he saw them together at the party.
Exactly. So that's what I think a gentleman would do. I think this is kind of scary.
I think from the very beginning, it was very obvious where the leaning was when it came to the main pairing, and it seems like there are a lot of events that are manipulated in order to have the scenes that the creator envisioned even when it doesn't really make sense from a character perspective or a plot perspective. There's also sequences where, in the first 70 chapters, this is like the second or third day that they've known each other, the second or third time that they're talking, and both Hades and Persephone are being extremely familiar with each other, as if they've known each other for months.
Right.
Which is also very strange, considering their age gap. This is a teenager that he met over the weekend, so...
Yeah. And, so... While Persephone is sleeping, though, she has that nightmare about her mom trapping her in a greenhouse and saying, like, when you're in here, nobody can hurt you. So we're starting to see, like, the beginnings of, like, a character arc, right? Stupid village girl, when you're in here, nobody can hurt you. And then she wakes up and she's like, oh my goodness, this is so crazy. Like, the first time I was out and about, I wake up in a strange man's bed. You really outdone yourself this time, Persephone. Maybe Mother was right, and she goes, well, I'm naive, but I'm not stupid, so now let's figure out how to get out of here, right? And so then we see that same sequence from the beginning of chapter 5, but now it's got additional dialogue where she's got the motivation to leave, right? And so she makes some kind of, like, commentary on Hades' knickknacks as she's navigating through his house. She sees he's got a massive indoor pool, and she goes, oh, that's just pretentious. Who needs an indoor pool that big? So you're seeing, like, little aspects of her personality here.
Well, not only that, but Hades is extremely rich.
Yeah. And so, chapter 7, a very good boy, that's when, at the end of chapter 6, Cerberus, Cerberus, the guardian of the Underworld, the three-headed dog, comes across Persephone and starts barking at her. And so chapter 7 is called A Very Good Boy. Hades is doing his thing, and then you've got like a scroll of text in the gutter that says the distant sounds of barking.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, and this is why I don't think she has a very extensive background reading traditional print comics. It's very much written like a screenplay.
Yeah.
Or like a book, where she'll have a descriptive adjective in 2 stars, like a screenplay, rather than having, bark, bark, bark in small font.
Yeah.
Which would typically connote a sound at a distance, you know? It's very Tumblr.
Yeah.
It very much, it very much reads like Tumblr.
Glomp.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, yeah, and so, and then this is kind of also where I get the idea, like, you can actually see it happening in real time, where she doesn't thumb it out before she draws it a panel at a time, because Hades goes, like, oh, like, barking, like, what's, Cerberus, what's Cerberus getting so pressed about? And instead of going straight to Cerberus, he quickly goes first to the bed that Persephone was sleeping in, and then he goes, oh, crap. And then he goes down the stairs and he goes, oh, crap, crap, crap. And then he goes to where the dog is. When it's like, if we're looking at this from like an expediency and like efficiency and visual storytelling point of view, why not just have him go to where the dog is?
Immediately.
And then think like, oh my God, is she awake? Is that what's going on? Please tell me he's not attacking her.
I think in general, and it's very obvious from the beginning that there's a problem with pacing in this story. In the beginning, I think the first 9 or 10 episodes cover one day.
Yeah.
And that problem persists throughout the entire run of the comic. And it's because in average update of 60, 70, 80 panels, maybe 20 panels are things like that, where it's like, you could have just cut that out.
Yeah.
You could have just cut straight to this. You could have just cut straight to that. There's a lot of intermediary panels that don't need to be there, but then in cases where there are actions happening, she doesn't put the intermediary panels there, so you'll have cases where characters are moving across the room without showing them walking places.
Yeah.
So they're just standing in one corner, and then in the next panel they're in a totally different area.
Right.
But then when it comes to showing action or in the chapter itself, instead of cutting between scenes efficiently or cutting out dialogue, she'll include dialogue that doesn't need to be in the comic to portray what she wants to portray. Like, she doesn't really seem to have goal-oriented writing.
Yeah.
Which is something that you and I both do. When we approach each episode, we go, okay, what's the goal for this chapter? What information do we want to convey to the audience? What is the setup that's happening in this chapter for the payoff in X chapter later? What are the bullet points that need to happen in this chapter for a later chapter to occur.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to happen in Lore Olympus. It's more of she's writing it chapter by chapter, and she doesn't really have the bullet points, goal-oriented writing where she's like, in this chapter, I want to show that Persephone can tame Cerberus. And if she had done that, you could have cut this down to like maybe 10 panels. But instead, we get an entire chapter.
Yeah, and
entire chapter on this one scene.
You would have had more time dedicated to like building up to their first interaction, but in this chapter, you know, the plan to escape is completely dropped. She is like really friendly to Hades and very familiar with him as well. There's that self-consciousness about being a stupid village girl is like gone. She's very confident in this interaction. The chastising about, you know, the indoor pool and all of these amenities that he has, there's nothing like that. And so all of these setups that we've seen in previous chapters that could have influenced their initial meeting are basically ignored, right?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing for me is that she doesn't even question how she got here.
Exactly, that happens later because it's like the creator is going like, wait a second, like I never answered that question. I need to address it somehow, but like she snuck it in at like a wrong moment in the chapter, right?
No, she had Persephone waking up. Persephone went to the pool area where she was confronted by Cerberus, and then Hades woke up and went to the pool area because he heard Cerberus barking. And then she tamed Cerberus, but instead of saying, "Who are you?" Well, she knows who he is.
Yeah.
She knows that he's Hades because he's famous. But she says, "How did I get here? This is really embarrassing.
Yeah.
You know, I hope nothing untoward happened. I don't know how I got that drunk." Instead of freaking out, she just, I don't know, it's very,
In fact, she asks who Minthy is before she asks, how did I get here?
Oh, geez.
Because the phone goes off and it's Minthy calling him. And then she goes, who's Minthy? And then you have that big extended flashback where he's got like this like boom memory time of like him and Minthy's toxic relationship, you know, like where they're smooching on each other. And she's like, you're a scumbag. And he goes, I know. And he's crying. And it's like, this is so emo.
It's very Tumblr.
Yeah. And then you have the exchange where he goes, do I look like a scoundrel to you? And like, again, to get to that interaction, you could tell she really wanted to have him say that line. But to get there, it was very like...
circuitous.
Yeah.
Convoluted.
Very convoluted. If we, as the audience, hadn't seen how she got there, at this point, I would think that he had attacked her, you know, and brought her to his house, because it's creepy.
No, it's very, you could tell she probably wrote a lot of stuff between these two characters before she started writing the story.
Yes.
So she probably forgot or didn't realize that for the audience, this is the first time they're interacting.
Yes.
And it just doesn't come off like a first-time interaction. The characters are very overly familiar with each other, and like you said, their personalities shift completely during this sequence versus the previous sequences.
Yeah, and so at the end of this chapter, this is chapter 9, Persephone and Hades are both on the same page about how she got there. They know it was Eros, somehow. There's no discussion of how they know, or like why Eros would do that, because if it were me, and I was Hades, I would not tie my comment about she could give Aphrodite a run for her money to, oh, now she's in my car drunk. This must have been Aphrodite. Oh, Aphrodite, you know.
Yeah, it's not like he saw Aphrodite or Eros doing that.
No, I would be like, because he said, I drove home, and then it's only when I got home that I noticed you were in the back of my car. He didn't go, I noticed the lock to my car was picked, I looked around, I saw you in the back, and there, like, I just knew that it had to be, because he didn't even know that Aphrodite overheard him, right?
No.
So it's all very convenient for the audience, but it's like, we have no, like, how did you know? Like, but anyway, like, that's besides the point. That's like a small, like, these are the things that were jumping out to me, so you can see how I was having a difficult time making it through the first 10 chapters, because this is just in the first 9 chapters, and then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm never going to be able to read all 70 chapters if I do this, right? So let me just read them all, and then from these initial impressions, you can kind of extrapolate those to the rest of the chapters.
Well, not only that, you can also pick out the really big moments.
Yes.
Instead of just nitpicking everything, you can pick out the really big, you know, the trends.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. So this first 10 chapters, I read that, and then I was like, man, you know, if it's going to be like this, I don't know if I can keep reading this, because there's so much here that it's like, this is like an early Webtoon comic. This is the kind of, you know, storytelling that you would expect of somebody who's inexperienced. This is their first comic. This is their first draft. They never went back and they edited it.
It's not her first draft, though. This was, I think she got halfway through the first season on Tumblr. So a lot of the criticism on the unpopular Lore Olympus subreddit, where they say the first season was the best season, they say it's because it's not her first draft. She had edited and built upon what she had already done on Tumblr.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, well that is interesting. Okay.
So yeah, this is the best content in Lore Olympus. So yeah.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, I mean, once you get to like the 20, 30 episode mark, she's definitely found her footing when it comes to like sequential paneling is a lot better. The style's a lot more consistent, and the story actually, like, you know, you see the characters in different locations doing different things. So it definitely improves a lot by that mark. But I mean, the first like 10, 20 chapters are pretty rough. I didn't know that she had.
The first 10 chapters definitely read like fan fiction.
Guy role plays.
Yeah.
You know. Like,
it's like Stephanie Meyer writing that meadow scene in Twilight. Lore Olympus in general gives me a lot of Twilight vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we're on chapter 10. And
at some point, after three episodes of Hades and Persephone having a very magical night together, even though she woke up in his house not knowing how she got there, he returns her home to Olympus, where she lives with Artemis, from the Underworld. And we see that the Underworld is very dark and constantly night, but Olympus is much more like what you would expect to see of Olympus. And she drives his car out of the Underworld into Olympus.
As they're leaving his house, though, the paparazzi takes a picture.
Yes.
And that comes back in episode 31, I think.
Oh, gosh.
So I was like, oh, the paparazzi thing, episode 31. But to be fair, it's only like 2 days later, so.
Yeah, but if that's episode 10 and episode 31, that's 20 weeks
I know.
in real time.
If you're following it weekly.
No, I would hate to be the person who was following it weekly in the early days. That's rough.
I think it's episode 31. I could be wrong, but I'll go back and look at that. But yeah, you can continue. Yeah, so I checked, and it's actually episode 33. In episode 10, that's when you have, like, I think they drive back, but then from that point onwards, you have Eros and Psyche and that conversation that lasts multiple chapters, I think. But it's one conversation that he's having with Artemis and Persephone.
Well, so they drive back to Olympus,
Yeah.
and Artemis is basically like, why is Hades here? Get away from my friend, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And I think this is when they reveal that Persephone is part of the Goddesses of Eternal Maidenhood between episode 10 and 30.
Yeah.
And Artemis has her friend Eros over, I believe.
Yeah.
Or he comes over later
To apologize.
to apologize for what he did to Persephone, and this is the first time she's meeting him. And they become instantly, like, best friends.
Yeah, she's even all over him at one point. Where
Yeah.
He is like, I can't remember what the exchange is, but he says, like, he compliments her or something, or he says something, and then she's like, pretty much like,
Sitting on his lap.
Yeah, sitting in his lap. And so it's like, okay, I guess she's like a touchy-feely kind of person.
For somebody who's really awkward in the beginning wearing a short dress.
Yeah, and Artemis says there's no men allowed in the house, but, I mean, she lets him in, and then it's weird because Artemis is, like, really overprotective, but then when her own brother is a friggin' creep, she's like, you
Yeah.
know? Like, well, that's no problem, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, are you blind, dude? Like,
Yeah.
Like, can you not see that she's visibly uncomfortable around this Apollo guy?
But yeah, okay, so she goes back to Olympus. Artemis doesn't like Hades. They reveal that Persephone and Artemis are both members of this club called the Goddesses of Eternal Maidenhood, where I think they're supposed to stay like virgin goddesses in order to receive the scholarship. So it's like a class of Greek goddesses, and this is like actual myth. Athena and Artemis and I believe Hestia, they're all considered virgin goddesses, and Persephone joined them upon the insistence of her mother Demeter, and or Demeter, and basically. So because of that, she's not allowed to be in a relationship, and she's sworn to basically nunnery. You know, like it's kind of like a convent lifestyle for female goddesses, and she's using this scholarship to attend a university in Olympus. But immediately after Hades drops her off, Eros comes over to apologize. They become BFFs pretty much immediately. He's coded as gay, because he gives her the best gay best friend, a shopping trip and makeover.
Yeah, he also asks if he can keep the furry pink jacket.
Yeah.
And he was wearing the salmon sweater.
I believe, fun fact, that he was initially confirmed to be gay in the Tumblr version. I mean, they, like, not confirmed to be gay, but, like, maybe pansexual or bisexual. But in the Webtoon version, they kind of sanitized him, and he's coded as gay, and he acts like a stereotypical gay best friend, but he ends up having the myth of Eros and Psyche later on.
Yeah, so is that, like, a decision that was made by the editor, or is that something that she decided to change herself?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think the original Tumblr comic in general was more suggestive,
Yeah.
even more suggestive than what we got on Webtoon. And Persephone's personality changed. I think she was sassier in the original Tumblr version from what I could see. Less of like an innocent cinnamon roll type character. So to what degree that was a Webtoon influence change is unknown, but I've heard rumors that Webtoon editors can suggest changes like that, where they suggest that the creator makes the main character like an more innocent, naive female character. But basically, yeah, so Eros comes over, he takes her shopping at the mall, gets her a bunch of clothes, and it's kind of a running theme in Lore Olympus that Persephone, you never see Persephone dress herself. In the first episode, it was Artemis, now it's Eros, and then later on, it's Hades buying her stuff to wear. So that's interesting and worth remarking upon. And I believe Apollo picks them up. Apollo and Hermes pick them up from the mall. So it's Artemis, Eros, and Persephone at the mall doing the shopping trip, and Apollo picks them up at the mall. And which episode is that?
That's in episode 17.
Episode 17. So basically from episode 10 to episode 17, we get Eros, Artemis, and Persephone, and then Apollo, episode 17. And then I believe Apollo and Hermes spend the night, and Apollo the whole time is kind of hitting on Persephone and being overly pushy.
Well, the reason she doesn't like him initially is because they're talking about Hades, and how Hades was so nice to Persephone.
And she said he only wants to bang you or something.
Yeah, basically he was gushing over how nice he was and how he gave her this cool jacket, and she keeps saying Hades is my friend. And then Apollo says, he was only being nice to you because he wanted to get in your pants, right? And
he's not wrong.
Right. But, Persephone, because later she says, sleeping your way to the top, that sounds so lazy. And she imagines somebody sleeping in bed. I don't know why during this exchange that soured her. Instead of going get in my pants, I wasn't even wearing pants, so what are you talking about?
Yeah, she's inconsistently naive.
Yeah.
So in after she sees the article, she doesn't know what sleeping your way to the top means, but here she knows what getting in your pants means.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why she doesn't like Apollo. He's very he's very pushy, he's kind of a jerk, very full of himself.
He's not really that much of a jerk, because she cuts her hand and he heals her hand. And then he says he's sorry, he tries to help her with a bag of rice, and then he says, look, I do a lot of work for my job as the sun guy, so I get stressed out, and I can't really temper my emotions very well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm sorry if I can take it out on you or, be a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
Are we cool? And she goes, yeah, I guess. And then she goes, I guess Apollo's kind of cute if I squint.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have that interaction. So it seems like they got off on the wrong foot initially, but he was never, overly predatory. There were no signs that he was a predator initially.
I think in the original version, again, Apollo was her ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the whole assault scene was only for Webtoon, and again, I'm not sure to what degree that was planned by Rachel herself or that was influenced by Webtoon.
Mm-hmm.
But meanwhile, while she's hanging out with Hermes, Artemis, Eros, and Apollo, this is the day after they meet and the day after the conversation with Hades.
Yeah.
Or the day where he drives her to Olympus. This is the same day.
It's the same morning.
It's the same morning. So it's
it's in the evening of the same morning that Hades and his brothers. They're during the family brunch, so they're actually
they're at the strip club.
At the strip club in the morning.
At the strip club.
and then cut back to those other characters in the evening.
Yeah,
on the same day,
so while she's hanging out with Artemis, Eros, and Apollo, the same day that Hades drives her back, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades are at the strip club.
Yeah. And Hera is in disguise as like a waitress, and then she like chastises Hades because she's like, dude, she's a kid, you know.
Yeah.
She doesn't say his age because
Persephone's
age because he only finds that out way later. But she's like, you know, she's not an object to for Hades to practice on. And then that's when you also reveal that he was going to propose to Minthe. Mm-hmm. He takes out the little box. Mm-hmm. And then he crushes the ring in his hand. Like, he crushes it into dust.
But you also see that Hades apparently tried to give a job to a stripper.
Yeah.
At the strip club.
You poached one of my best workers, you know, yeah.
Yep. And I guess I don't know what the point of that scene is. Just to show that he was planning on proposing to Minthe?
I guess it's confusing because it's like those guys are saying a bunch of really, like, disgusting, like, vulgar things. Yeah. Like, gross things. And Hera is like, no, leave her alone. She's just a kid. Like, you have no business like, why are you talking about her like that? Why are you being creepy? But then she walks it all back later by
trying to set them up.
Yeah. So it's like, what's the point of this scene? I don't get it. I don't know. I liked Hera at that part. I was like, yeah, Hera, you're right.
Yeah, and it shows that Zeus and Poseidon are kind of jerks.
Yeah, they're kind of like frat boys.
Yeah. So then episode 21, so that's episode like 18 to 20.
No, episode 21 is when they actually pick them up. They're not hanging out.
Oh, okay.
In the strip club.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's going to be like episode 25 or
so
something.
like the next important event is episode 24.
I think so, yeah.
Do you want to cover what happens in episode 24?
I mean, I could. Basically, so this episode, it starts with like a content warning because it contains themes of sexual trauma that may be upsetting for some readers. Essentially, what happens in the previous episode 25. So this is, episode 23 is they're watching a movie, and Artemis says, "Hey, you guys can finish the movie if you want." She's with Hermes and Apollo on the sofa, and Persephone's already gone to bed. And so then it opens with Persephone in her bed sleeping, and then the door cracks open, and then Apollo comes in with his creepy-looking eyes. He says, "Oh, I came to see you." And he goes, "I've been waiting all day for this."
This is the first day that he's met her.
Yeah, it's the first day he's met her, and oh man. Like,
it's the night after she wakes up in Hades' bed.
Yeah, and I mean, when she was in the car with Hades, they had like a brief exchange where he goes, "You haven't met like the sun god yet?"
Yeah.
"Oh, trust me, you're gonna love to meet that guy. Like, he's a real piece of work." But I mean, I didn't get what was so bad about this guy. I know a lot of, like, I tried to read the comments on the previous episode before this happened, this, assault happened, where people didn't like him because he wasn't Hades. And they're like, no, bring Hades back. Who is this, like, dollar store Hades? Like, bring back Hades. This purple Hades is not cutting it.
Right.
Because he was, like, getting in the way of the OTP.
Right.
And it's like, okay, so I understand disliking him for that reason, but I didn't see anything about him that was really, like off-putting or bad, really. I mean, I thought, Artemis is really protective of Persephone. Mm-hmm. If she's okay with this guy being around Persephone, then maybe he's not a bad guy, right? And then,
yeah, you would think if it was your own brother, you would kind of know.
Yeah. And
the qualities of your own brother.
Yeah, and she's not saying, like, Persephone, you can't be alone with Apollo, like, he's a creep. Because she's like, oh, no men allowed in the house and all this other stuff.
But then Eros, Hermes, and Apollo are in the house.
Yeah, and Apollo turns out to be, like, a predator because he kind of coerces her, manipulates her. He coerces a yes from her, basically. He forces her into sex. He says, "You've been flirting with me all day, Persephone. Don't act like you don't want this." And she starts questioning herself. She's like, do I like this? Like, I can't think properly. And then she goes, well, I'm part of this...
the goddesses of eternal maidenhood.
Yeah, maidenhood, and I don't
can't be in a relationship, yeah.
And then he goes, well, I'm a really grand guy. Maybe you can make, like an excuse for me. And then there's, like, an inner monologue while this is happening to her. It's all very, like, messed up. And she's, like, kind of feeling guilty and confused because she is not enjoying any of that, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then he takes some pictures and then he leaves, like, friggin' weirdo. But I just thought that kind of came out of nowhere.
I thought the actual scene itself was handled well.
Yeah.
Like, tactfully. But I think plot-wise, leading up to it, and then especially the timeline, it was very sudden.
Yeah.
And then the consequences were also not handled very well. Like, there's immediately after this, she has, like, 3 episodes dedicated to a single phone call between Hades and Persephone.
Yeah, I think what would have been better is if if a week had passed, right? Where Apollo is trying to get with her for an entire week, and she
keeps asking her out, and she keeps saying no.
And she texted Hades at the beginning of the week, and he didn't respond for a whole week. At the end of the week, this happens, where it's like Artemis is like, hey, you know, don't spend time with Persephone, like leave her alone. Persephone, watch out for Apollo. He's my brother, but he can be a little much because he thinks
he can be pushy.
Yeah, he thinks he's like God's gift to women, right? So be careful around him. And then the one time Artemis isn't there for some reason, that's when he strikes.
Or you could even sneak into her room.
Exactly.
Make it really, if you really want to make it so that Artemis didn't know.
Exactly. And like timing wise, that probably would have been better. But you know,
I think Rachel has a problem with time skips. There's just a lot of scene after scene after scene where it's all chronologically following the previous scene, and there's no moment of like 2 or 3 panels could show like Persephone sends the text, and then you could have a couple panels of Apollo, you know, at different points in time. When she's going to class, he tries to pick her up, you know, when you could even introduce the paparazzi at that point, because she sees it when she's in class. So she can go to class, he can try to pick her up, and she says no, you know, I don't want to go out with you, I'm not interested in you like that, and then he just keeps harassing her over and over. That could have all happened in a single chapter.
Yeah.
Where at multiple times he just keeps asking her out and pushing his way into her life, and then at the end of the chapter you could have had him sneaking into her room.
Yeah.
And waking her up.
Yeah, because it just feels too short otherwise. And this is something that I struggle with. I mean, I think it's different if there's like urgency, because it's like when you're writing like an action comic or something, or like a comic where it's like something crazy just happened, and then it's like, okay, what do you can't
you have
really,
to address the aftermath of what just happened.
You can't skip forward a week and be like, whoa, that was crazy what happened last weekend, let me tell you. But in this week, you know, I've done a barbecue.
I put it out of my mind.
Yeah, I paid my taxes. No, I mean, you can't really do that, but there's no real urgency for her to talk to Hades again so soon, right? And so it feels like this entire traumatic event that happened to her, like, it pushed her to talk to him because she wanted to seek comfort in his presence, but that seems so rushed. It's like, you don't need to rush her talking to Hades. Like, give them some breathing room, because then that builds the uncertainty as to whether or not she knows whether or not Hades wants to be her friend or not.
Well, you could have had a week pass after she sent a text, because she sent it from an unknown number, and then Apollo keeps trying to ask her out. You could have her finding out about the paparazzi at that point in time.
Yeah.
Put that plot line in at that point in time. You could have Hades talking about wanting to propose to Minthy, to Zeus and Poseidon, and just get rid of Hera's reaction, because Hera tries to set them up later.
Yeah.
I think it would have been better if Hera was like, don't marry Minthy, she's not good for you. That would have been better, and you could have had the scene focus just on him trying to propose to Minthy. And then, meanwhile, have the assault scene after a week passes and she feels abandoned by Hades, and then, you know, you could have 3 days pass where she doesn't leave her room because she's so upset, you know, after what just happened. Or, you know, I know not all victims react the same to trauma. You don't have to have a big dramatic, you know, I couldn't leave my bed for 3 days after what happened to me. You could have had a 3 days pass where she tries to act normal, alternatively, and there's no contact between her, Hades, or Apollo, and she just feels like used and discarded.
Yeah.
And then on the 3rd day, Hades calls her after he realizes who it was.
Yeah.
Then she sends a text after the 3rd day, after Apollo leaves, like, oh, I'm sorry for bothering you.
Yeah.
You know, blah, blah, blah.
And then that's when you could have had the exchange where she goes, I'm sorry to barge in on your life, and he goes, I would pay you to barge in on my life. Because that was premature when it had only been like half an hour.
Yeah.
Or like, you know, they've only like spent maybe 30 minutes talking to each other, and then he drops that line. I would have been like, dude,
too soon.
I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
You know, what are you talking about, bro?
No, especially if it was over the phone, you could play that off as like trying to be suave, but it came off as awkward, versus like she's a captive audience in his house. You know, she woke up in his bed and she has no idea how she got there, and this guy's telling her that he would pay her to barge in on his life.
And she just like sips her water,
and she's just like, oh, okay, this is awesome. You know, he's hitting on me while I have no idea how I got here, and you know,
where's the knife? Give me the knife. Checks to see if all her organs are there. You know.
So yeah, I think the assault was handled well in the chapter, but I think the aftermath.
Yeah, in the context of the timeline of the story, it was off. But I think the chapter itself, with the subject matter, she approached it really well.
Yeah.
You know, that was really great. She captured the voice of a person who felt like coerced perfectly, because that's something that people don't understand, is that you can always retract consent, and coercion is still assault.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's still sexual assault if it's
Mm-hmm.
coerced. You know, that's what a lot of people just
even though it's
understand.
not forced.
Exactly. I mean, he didn't, like, it wasn't, like, violent,
Mm-hmm.
but it's still coerced, and it's still terrible, you know?
And she didn't want it.
No, exactly. So that was top-notch, I think. That was great. But then the episode after that kind of goes into Hades' backstory with Kronos. And his mother. And he has a nightmare, and then he wakes up and then sees the message, and then he goes, oh, crap, you know, that was her all along. So then he calls her, and that initiates the phone call. And a couple things of note for the phone call, he makes the remark, hey, you sound like a teenager. Like, that's something a teenager would say. And she goes, oh, yeah, it is something a teenager would say, huh? Mm-hmm. And then she asks him the deeply probing personal question, how come you're not married? And he basically says, well, you know, I'm old, my job is hard, and there's, like, a cool montage of time showing him in different period wear, Victorian, and then he's, like, dressed as, like, a coal miner in one of them. And then he goes, so I don't really have time, and there's not really, like, many women to choose from, right? Like, there's Hestia, I think he says Hestia. And he goes, she is sworn to about celibacy, though, and that's not really for me. And then Persephone goes, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. But, you know, like, she reacts to that, right?
Because she's also sworn to a vow of celibacy.
Yeah, and so then he talks about his brothers, and then I think the call ends with them, like, falling asleep each.
And then Artemis discovers them the next morning.
Yeah.
And she gets concerned.
Yeah.
And I think Hera actually invites her to her home the next day.
Yeah, so Hera and Zeus have a bit of a falling out. She kind of goes like, well, you know, I was right, but should I really get in the way of what's going on between Hades and Persephone? And so then she comes up with the idea for the internship.
Yeah, and that's episode 31, basically. She tells Persephone to work for Hades.
Yeah.
And then episode 32 is, I believe, when... I don't even remember what happened in episode. He chases after Aphrodite.
Yeah, to talk to her about, like, why'd you prank me?
That was kind of a pointless chapter, in my opinion. It doesn't really add anything to the current story.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's because... Yeah. I guess it's because you need time to develop why they like each other, I guess, or why he likes her, or why he would be interested in her. Mm-hmm. But they are not obviously able to spend time with each other because they are worlds apart. So really, you're just having these scenes between, like, Persephone and other characters, and then Hades and other characters talking about the other person that they're interested in, to kind of be like, oh, you like her, don't you? No, I don't like her. Oh, you have a crush on Hades, don't you? No, I don't have a crush on Hades. It's like, that's all they talk about with other characters. And you're like, oh my god, we get it. You know,
right.
just bring them together. Like, I think it would have been better. Okay, let's say you have the party scene at the beginning.
I think she should have cut straight to the internship.
Exactly. Then you cut straight to the internship, right?
Instead of all of these intervening chapters.
Yeah.
Oh, what did you think of the Eros and Psyche thing, by the way? We completely skipped over it.
Yeah, because it was so, like, it felt like stalling to me. Like,
but she was originally attempting to have multiple myths in the same story.
Yeah, and then she did it once, and then she tapped out. Because it's like, he was, like, if you had somehow woven that into the actual story that she's telling, because she's telling a story and then she's also doing retellings of myths at the same time, right? So his entire story with Psyche was told as a conversation to explain why he does what his mom tells him to do, which is really lame, you know, in terms of, like,
how to bring it up.
Yeah, if you're gonna try to do a bunch of Greek storytelling, why not instead have it be so that instead of him telling them about it, why don't you show it? Like, why do you do everything your mom tells you to? I could tell you, but I mean, I don't think you believe me. And then you show him going someplace or, like, following his mom around the city, because it turns out the nymph assistant that she's got with her in that scene with Hades is Psyche, disguised as a nymph, right? And so you could show that happening in the background and then reveal it in a later chapter. This is what's going on between him and that nymph and his mom. Instead of having it be a conversation that he's telling somebody else that pulls you out of the story completely. Because when they cut back to present time on the sofa, I was like, that's 3 chapters later. That's 3 weeks later that people are reading this. And it's a flashback. You know, what does that have to do? Apart from the fact that that's why he does what she tells him to do. It doesn't really have anything to do with anything.
I think that if she wanted to do multiple myths, she should have spent season 1 covering Hades and Persephone and just cut out all the fluff and cut straight to the internship, you know, cut to Kronos and, like, all that stuff. And then the next season could have been Eros and Psyche.
Yeah.
You know, like, each season covers a different couple.
Yeah, but
they're like Bridgerton style.
Yeah, she doesn't really closely follow the myths though as the story of Lore Olympus goes on. Like even the myth of Hades and Persephone isn't really closely followed, right? Like the myth of Eros and Psyche is much closer
to the original.
I mean, there was no internship in the original Persephone myth, right?
No, it's clear that she's more interested in Persephone and Hades as a couple.
So then why even have that entire tangent in there? Like, it felt like stalling, and if her intention wasn't stalling, I mean, that's how it felt. It just felt like stalling.
Yeah, I think from episode 24, and then you could have had one episode covering the aftermath of that, and then it ends with her calling Hades, and then have the call cover just one episode, because I think 3 episodes was excessive. And a lot of the questions,
too soon.
A lot of the questions that she asks him are so familiar. They're overly familiar for somebody you just met once.
Yeah.
I think you could have saved some of that ammunition for the internship. I think you could have had a call between them where she's acting off, and he can sense that, and he's one of the only people in her life who sensed that, even though she barely knows him. So then that would, like, build up, like, why she likes Hades, because from my perspective, like, there's not really a reason. Because she says he's the only person who respects me, but it's like, what about Artemis? What about Hermes? You know, what about Eros?
Yeah,
you know?
And that's another thing. She knows all these people. She's friends with all these people, but when she's at the party, she's like, I thought meeting all these people would make me feel less alone. So it's like, what is it? Are you popular or are you alone?
Well, that's not true, because she only met Eros after the party.
But Hermes, she's been besties with for a long time,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So, and Artemis too, right?
Yeah. No, she's been besties with Artemis since the flashback, which happened like a week before.
Yeah, and I mean, there was also a flashback of her and Hera at a party when she was
Yeah,
a
but
kid.
she doesn't know Hera very well.
I mean, but Hera is still kind of like
A family friend.
Yeah, like nice to her, right?
Yeah.
So she's not completely alone.
No, the story vacillates between Persephone being an outsider and Persephone being like royalty.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, if they cut straight from the assault to the phone call, which would only be 1 episode, and then they cut to the internship. And I think you could cut out the Hera, like, I think the Hera and Persephone chapter is 3 chapters.
Yeah.
That confrontation is 3 chapters. And again, there's just so many things where it's like, you could have cut stuff out and made it a single chapter, and that would have advanced the story much faster.
But, you know, in that Hera and Persephone chapter, you've got Persephone talking about how much she likes Hades again. So you gotta have that in the chapter.
No, you could cut that out.
No, you got
She doesn't need to constantly be telling everyone that she likes this guy that she met for 20 minutes.
How else are we gonna know? You gotta have it in there. You gotta have her taking a picture of his dorky portrait at Hera's house.
You could take a picture of his dorky portrait and save it for herself instead of texting him. And then she could text it to him later after they start their workplace romance. Like, you could have had, I think just cutting straight to the workplace romance would have been better.
Yeah.
I don't remember, episode 33, 34, and 35 are when he finds out about the paparazzi photo, right?
Yeah, so 33, 34, and 35. Basically in 35, I think Zeus has a side piece at his job
Thetis,
too.
and Thetis is Minthe's frenemy.
The way they talk to each other is like, so like...
Thetis and Zeus, or Thetis and Minty?
Minty, it's like, like, love you, bestie, and then hang up the phone. I cannot stand her. You know, like, it's so...
very Shondaland.
It's such Shondaland. It's like...
Hey, bitch, what up, slut?
Exactly, like, that's what it is. And it's like...
Get in, we're going shopping.
Who talks like this? Like, what?
They're my favorite characters. Like, not gonna lie, I think Minty is, like, so underrated.
Yeah, but, I mean, Minty, like, the thing that bothers me about her is sometimes she's drawn with pointy ears and sometimes she's not drawn with pointy ears.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Like, what's up with that? Does she
That's
have
just-
pointy ears?
that's
or
just
does
art
she not have
inconsistency.
pointy ears?
She's
So.
nymph trash. She has pointy ears.
Yeah.
And Thetis at one point suggests maybe you should get your ears done. Which is just like, how do you write that without realizing what you're writing?
Yeah, okay, cool.
So yeah, Zeus is cheating on Hera with Thetis, and Thetis and Minty are like frenemies, and Thetis is a gold digger, and she's trying to get Minty like inducted into that lifestyle.
Yeah, and she says
like, looks like Hades is stepping out with someone else.
Yeah, she goes, looks like your meal ticket's going bye-bye.
Yeah.
You know, and she goes, oh, you gonna cry? Crying is for wives. And
Yeah.
then there's, like, a picture on the desk.
They're so evil.
Yeah, like, they talk like mafiosos.
Yeah, they really got like they're playing the long game here.
Yeah, like...
The homewrecker long game.
But it's crazy because it's like, all Minty said was, did you get me that purse I won?
I know,
You know?
but she's evil. You have to
haven't-
realize.
I haven't even seen the purse, you know? Like...
Where's the purse?
Yeah. She doesn't bring the purse to work. she doesn't dress like really nice. And she couldn't have the coat. Hades didn't give her.
Oh yeah, in episode 36, after Minty finds out about the article, she confronts Hades.
Yeah.
And you realize that Hades, she asked for the coat that Hades gave to Hera, but Hera didn't accept. And Minty asked for it, and he didn't give it to her. But he gave it to some woman he just met like 5 minutes ago. So she's understandably insecure and upset about that. And she says, you only like her because she's young and dumb, and she looks like she'll do whatever you ask her to. And that's something that characters keep saying to Hades over and over and over again.
Yeah, and he doesn't like answer her question. All he says, he starts gaslighting her, and he goes, "You jealous?"
Yeah. Yep.
I thought you didn't get jealous. I really don't like Hades.
Minty is very, justice for Minty, man. And then after that, Minty's like trying to put on a face where she says, "I'm not jealous. I don't really care about you. Blah blah blah. Why didn't you come to the party?" She doesn't answer, and then you cut to Persephone in class, and then other people are kind of gossiping about her. And this is when she says, "Sleeping to the top sounds lazy, so inconsistently naive, but she gets really good grades. She's really studious. She offers to tutor one of her classmates." And the teacher says, "That's what I would expect from a goddess." You know, the unstated epithet is that you're a dumb nymph, or a dumb satyr or whatever to the green guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's why you get bad grades. So there's like in-universe racism or classism going on here.
Yeah, that's, and so like going back to the point about making her relatable, basically to me, I just kind of view this as like Demeter is like a Kris Jenner and she's like a Kylie Jenner, and I guess that would make Hades like Travis Scott, and it's just a bunch of really rich people who have like, they don't really have like relatable problems in my opinion, because it's like, the average person like worries about affording to pay for rent, getting a job. She doesn't need a job, affording housing, things like that, where it's like these like problems are very based on interpersonal, like who you surround yourself with. Like if you surround yourself with terrible people who are all celebrities and they're all high on their own stash, basically, you're going to run into these kinds of interpersonal problems, right? But it's not really relatable for me. It's very much like she saw like
It's aspirational.
Yeah.
It's
like,
very Bollywood.
Yeah, it's like Bollywood, but like in Hercules, heroes are like athletes, like professional athletes, and they get sponsorships and everything like that. But what was appealing about the romance between Meg and Hercules is that Meg is like an average person, and she's like, "Look, dude, like
I don't buy your celebrity thing."
Yeah, like you're super famous, you've got it all, Wonder Boy, and she's like cynical, right? So that like two people from totally different worlds. That's interesting. This one is like they're trying to do two people from totally different worlds,
but she couldn't bear to make Persephone actually poor.
Yes, and it doesn't really make sense because it's like, if she was actually poor and she had to work to get those nice clothes, that would be something.
And that's why she needed the scholarship. That's why she would be really upset and afraid to lose it.
Yeah.
And that would add some stakes, because now she's just upset about disappointing her mother, but she doesn't really care about her mother in the first place. But if she actually needed the scholarship to actually afford to go to school, and then when Apollo assaults her, she's like very scared of losing it.
Yeah.
That would be really upsetting and sad, and you would feel really bad for Persephone. That would humanize her a lot.
Exactly. And so it would be like, yeah, my mom let me out into this realm, but with one condition: I have to pay my own way. Like I have to pay for my own housing.
She cut me off.
Yeah, I have to pay for my own housing.
And that way you could make her like from a rich family and like recognizable, but still poor.
Yeah.
And she's dealing with stuff that she'd never had to deal with before.
Yeah, and then you add like the paparazzi drama on top of that, and then it becomes like a really like dramatic story where you're really rooting for her to come out on top.
She's the underdog.
Yeah. So.
And then so in episode 36 ends with Apollo picking her up from school, and then this entire chapter, episode 37, she tells Apollo that I don't want that to happen again. You're a jerk. She gets really upset, and then Cerberus shows up, and Apollo's just a total jerk.
Yeah, I mean, he's like unusually chipper for some guy who just basically forced himself. It's like he's like unusually.
He's in like such denial that it's almost like not even
socially
dense.
Yeah, just extremely. He's got no social skills, and it's just shocking that Artemis doesn't
know that about her brother.
Pick up on that. Cerberus comes and chomps on the car.
Where did Cerberus come from?
I don't know. He just goes back to Hades at the end of the chapter, and he wearing a flower crown. And Hades is like, "What the?"
I feel like this was one of those instances where she's like, I don't know how to end this scene, so I'm just gonna have Cerberus show up.
Yeah.
So Cerberus shows up, they hang out, and then Cerberus goes home to Hades with a flower crown. I like the visual of the sun god in the background. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that guy who does his rounds around the Earth every... Helios, right?
Helios, yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. Helios is cool.
But this entire chapter is kind of pointless.
Yeah.
38... I think it's another pointless chapter. It's the dream sequence.
Yeah.
Do you know who this character is in the dream sequence?
Is it supposed to be Hades?
Supposedly it is Hades. That was confirmed on her Patreon, supposedly.
Yeah.
But that's just so weird and out of character.
Yeah,
Like, it just seems like she wanted some horror visuals. Like, she came up with a horror visual and she's like, I'm just gonna put this in my comic, even though it doesn't make any sense.
Hades is a creepy pervert demon.
Yeah.
Talking about her feet.
This is very Tumblr.
Yeah.
I know that I can smell your ambitions as they rot at your feet. I guess she's trying to build up Persephone's insecurities, being that she'll never live the life that she wants because she's so under the control of her mother. Which is why I think the season 3 ultimate villain is Demeter, by the way.
Yeah.
I think so.
Episode 38.
She's getting ready for work.
Yeah.
What did you think of her full lingerie set when she doesn't know what sleeping her way to the top means?
I mean, she only owns one dress, too, and it's like the chitin?
Chitin.
It's the chitin. So I don't know why she would have a full lingerie
I think
set.
it's implied that Eros bought it for her, but, like, the thing that I don't get is, like, if she's supposed to be a nature-loving free spirit, because also in the first 70 chapters she says we used to, like, run around all day in nature picking berries and falling asleep under the stars, and she's been naked around Hermes a bunch of times. So, like, why wouldn't you just have her dress in, like, really loose, comfortable hippie clothing and, like, not wear underwear? If you wanted her to be, like, sexy.
Yeah, and she should have, like...
And, like, but, like, innocently, naively sexy.
Yeah, she should have, like, body hair sprouting.
But I'm saying, like,
well.
even then, like, you could just have it so that she's a free spirit who walks around barefoot everywhere.
Yeah, and she's, like, dirty.
Like a hobbit or something.
Yeah. I mean... There's not, and that's like one of the problems I have is like I'm constantly confused as to what the tone and theme is.
I'm confused as to her character.
Yeah.
Like in some instances she's like aware of how like flirtatious she is and she's coming on to Hades very strongly. And then in some instances she's like sleeping your way to the top. What does that mean, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like I don't know if she's supposed to be like unknowingly attractive and like free-spirited. Or is she supposed to be, like, knowingly attractive? Because she's also really jealous of Minthy, and it's almost like an intentional thing that she's getting closer to Hades when Minthy's, like, right there and is his girlfriend.
Yeah, I mean, it's like one of those things where it's like if you took the dialogue and the context of the scenes and you said character A and character B, and that's all you said about it, and you took those and you put them out there without telling somebody who the characters were, I would not be able to tell you
Which
said
character,
what
yeah.
and who did what.
Yep.
Like, if you showed me that scene with Apollo, and you said, okay, Apollo said this in the car about Hades, he's only being nice to you because he wanted to get in your pants. And then you said later a character assaults Persephone, I wouldn't have guessed that it was Apollo. You know?
Yeah.
I would have been like, the guy who said he's only being nice to you so you can get in your pants is the guy who would later only be nice to her so that he could get in her pants.
Yep.
You know, that just seems too unself-aware, like, too ridiculous, especially in the same day. That's bizarre to me.
So I think this is like 2 or 3 days after she met Hades.
Yeah.
Because it's like the next day was the strip club scene and then going to the mall. That night she was assaulted by Apollo. The next day she went to class. And then that night she had the nightmare. And then the next day she's getting ready for work. So this is like the 3rd day. So the 3rd day after she met Hades, she's getting ready to go to work to the Underworld. That was a really fast turnaround time on Hera's part. Like, usually when you get accepted for a job and then when you actually start, it's like a few weeks.
Yeah, but I guess because she's, like, famous, it was, like, expedited or something.
I don't know. Like, that would have been a perfect time to have a time skip.
Yeah.
You could have had it so that there was, like, a week in between, 2 weeks. Oh, you start in 2 weeks, you know?
Yeah.
The internship starts in 2 weeks, but it just starts, like, the next day.
Yeah.
It's very, you know, and it just comes off, like, very much like the person who wrote it didn't really consider how these things work in the real world.
Yeah.
I've never had a job that starts the day after I applied for it.
No.
Yeah.
Like, that's not if that's how the real world operated, everything would be such a rat race. It wouldn't even be funny.
Yeah.
And another thing is, like, while she's doing the internship, she's not doing her regular classes, right?
Yeah.
But
no, she goes to class in the morning, and then she has, like, half day at the internship, because she tutors the green guy in the morning, and then Hermes comes to pick her up.
Right.
Later. So in episode 38, she's getting ready, Apollo's there, and he's like, shouldn't you wear something more conservative? And then at the end, Thanatos, like, rips her away from the train and says, you know, I got a meeting, sweets, you know?
Yeah. But what I thought was funny was she's like, you have wings, you're so lazy, why do you have to get on the train? And I was like, that's a good point. He does have wings. He is lazy.
What do you think of Thanatos' character?
What do you mean? What do I think of his character?
I like Thanatos.
I don't.
Because he has a personality. I mean, he's very sour and he slacks off on the job.
Right, but it's like, what does that bring to the story, right? Like,
I mean, like, a lot of the characters don't really do anything plot-wise, but in terms of characters, he has a more enjoyable personality than, like, other people in the comic.
Yeah, but it just feels like, you know, the creator saw all these different characters from the myths at her disposal to, like, put into the comic somehow.
It's like the MCU.
Yeah, it's like, let's bring Ant-Man in here.
Yeah.
Let's bring Spider-Man. Yeah, let's bring this guy. Let's bring that guy. And it's like, okay, but, like, what do they actually bring to the story? I think because the more characters you have, the more plot threads you're kind of introducing.
And the more time you're wasting.
Yeah. Especially because all the characters talk about is how much Hades and Persephone like each other to Hades or Persephone, and then Hades or Persephone goes, I do not. And then they're like, yeah, you do. And it's like, that's all they're there for. You know?
Well, Thanatos doesn't do that. That's why I like him. He's like one of the few characters who's like, I don't care.
Yeah, I know, but what else does he do in the story?
Well, you have to keep reading, I guess.
Okay, well.
So episode 39, she gets to the Underworld, but also you see that Hades is kind of a jerk boss. And he's like micromanaging Thanatos. I like the framing and the composition and the colors of these scenes, but Hades is a total jerk.
I don't like Hades. I think he's like...
I think he's a jerk. I think he's very, like, two-faced. Like, when it comes to a young girl that he wants to, like, bang, he's really nice and gentlemanly, but when it comes to his own employees, he's a total jerk.
Yeah.
I really like the sequence of her getting to the Underworld Corporation. The colors and the atmosphere is really cool. Even though, again, it's very minimal. You see, like, you know, her reflection in the elevator. That was cool. All the big people and, like, the small, tiny nymphs. That was really cool. A lot of atmospheric shots. And then that's the first time that Persephone and Minthy meet. And Minthy sends her on a wild goose chase.
She sends her to, like, Tartarus or something. Like, she sends her to a restricted area, but they say there's a breach in Tartarus.
Yeah, it's Tartarus.
Yeah.
Because she recognizes her from the tabloid photo. And you really contrast Minthy being tall and glamorous and older and confident with Persephone being, like, very small and innocent and...
Yeah, Persephone even says she's so beautiful and thin.
Yeah.
Specifically, she says she's so beautiful and thin.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting, because Persephone is not big, she's tiny.
But she's curvy.
Yeah.
And Minthy's very, like, model thin and tall.
Yeah.
Like the traditional 2000s beauty standard.
Yeah.
And then at the end of episode 39, all the shades wake up. Episode 40, I believe, they attack her, and then she tries to use her power to escape. I think this is the first time they show them using their powers.
Mm-hmm.
But the powers kind of come out of nowhere, and then they're never really explained. I don't know what any character can do with their powers.
Yeah, I mean, Apollo, when he heals her hand earlier, he says healing's kind of my thing. But he also uses, like, a medical kit. Like, it's like a little... It looks like
gauze.
It's not even gauze. It's like a little snack pack that he rips open and pours it on there and then goes... And then she's healed. So, I don't really know to what extent that was planned out. And then Hades just comes in and, like, does the Thanos snap.
Mm-hmm.
And all those guys, like, go into dust.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I couldn't tell you what each character can do.
Yeah.
I think the imagery when she uses her powers is very beautiful. But I couldn't tell you what Persephone can and can't do apart from, like, grow stuff.
Yeah.
So she creates a forest to hide from the shades that are attacking her. And then Hades is, like, frickin' busting Thanatos' balls with Minthy and being really petty. And then an alarm goes off. There's been a breach in Tartarus. And I just noticed that Hades wasn't wearing glasses before, and now he's wearing glasses.
Yeah. So
How
there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of that, and that's like one of the things. It's like when you make a comic, you have to be really good at expressions. You got to make sure that the expression of the character is matching what they're saying.
Well, not only that, you have to be really good at continuity.
Yeah, continuity, but more specifically, if like a character is going to be, doing an action off screen, like if you cut to him wearing glasses, but he was like this, then it'd be like, okay, he put his glasses on.
Or like when the alarm went off, you have a panel where he's unfolding his glasses, and then in the next panel he's wearing the glasses.
Yeah, and so it's like you said, but yeah, I mean, like the actions and everything like that are very stiff.
Mm-hmm. Well, she has expressive character body language, but she can't show movement from one panel to the next.
Yeah.
So like each individual panel has good composition and good color and good blocking and good body language, but from one panel to the next, when a character is performing an action, it's difficult to see how they went from that one panel to the next panel.
Yeah.
So anyway, Hades appears at Tower 4 to rescue Persephone. Again, the imagery here is really cool. I really like this sequence. It's probably the best sequence in the comic, in my opinion. One of the best sequences in the comic, the second best for me, was when they went to the Underworld. Just because I really like fantasy imagery. Like, my comic is high fantasy and dark fantasy, and this is like totally up my alley. So he rescues Persephone. They're awfully familiar. I don't know why she covers his eyes.
Because she says, I don't want you to see me crying again. Because he's seen her cry like twice now. Well, the first time he saw her cry when he was like putting her in the bed, and then like the first night, and the second time when it was over the phone, he knew she was crying, and she goes, "Well, how do you know?" And he's like, "Because you sound sad."
Yeah. So episode 40 and 41, she gets confronted by the Shades. Hades rescues her, and then he asks why she's there, and then she says, "Hera got me this internship with the Underworld." And she takes a shower in the Underworld Corporation and wonders whether or not she has a crush on Hades. This is literally the day after she was assaulted, just keeping that as a reminder. Hades sees her in her underwear, which is just unnecessary.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about, like, I think a lot of people who like to defend the series are people who are really... they really like the series. They feel the need to defend it in the face of criticism. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not you can actually say for a fact if her actions and behaviors are consistent with somebody who has just been assaulted, with coercion and stuff like that. But I think instead of using it as an opportunity to sort of like talk for all people who are victims of that, just from like Persephone's character, right? Looking at the type of person Persephone is, where she felt very self-conscious of the fact that she was a village girl in the first episode going to the party, and then saying, like, I wonder why Eros did that. He must have been mad at me. I must have done something to make him mad. And then after the thing with Apollo, I would think that she would be feeling pretty down about it, because she was really down about Hades not responding to her text message. Right? So I would think that she would feel pretty down about it for a long while, and it's only been a matter of, like, hours, days, And so...
literally the next day.
Yeah, so from her character, not speaking for all victims who go through like a traumatic event like that, but for her character, from what we've seen of her character so far, I would think that she would be having a hard time with it, not being like very jovial and friendly and like...
Here's the thing, I think it's one thing to say like not every victim has the same reaction to a traumatic event like that, but it's another thing to just completely forget about it entirely and include it in the story for drama.
Yeah.
And then mishandle the execution of the aftermath. So we've had a sexual assault of the main character, and the next several chapters are covering her flirting with Hades. She goes to work and acts like everything's normal, and that would be one thing if we were getting snippets of her internal, interiority, where she's saying stuff like, I have to pretend that everything's okay even though it's not. Just some indication that she's dealing with this trauma. But honestly, in the next couple chapters where Hades sees her at the office and he, sees her when she changes into the mortal realm clothing, I honestly think we get more panels of Hades internally moaning over Persephone being so hot than we get any panels of Persephone ruminating over what happened to her. I think the only instance where it comes up is when the flash bulb goes off and she's reminded of Apollo taking pictures of her. That's the
Yeah.
only other time it comes up after the chapter where it happens.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's the only other time.
Artemis also tells her, like, I don't think you're taking your duties too seriously. Like, I think again.
Right. And then she tells Artemis, let me tell you something about your brother. And then she never says it. And then at the end of episode 70, where we stopped, where Pyrrhic stopped reading for this episode, that was when she finally tells Eros about the assault.
Yeah.
But, you know, it happens in in episode 24. There's the flashbulb going off somewhere between episode 40 and 50. They, I think it's her second day at Underworld Corp. They come across Hera disguised as Paparazzo. And then in episode 69-70, that's when Eros confronts Persephone and she finally admits to somebody what happened to her. So in real life, episode 24 to episode 70 is, it's 46. It's 46 episodes.
That's 6 weeks shy of a year.
Yeah, that's basically 11 months passing in real life with no mention.
Yeah.
Apart from the paparazzi picture going off, the flashbulb going off, and then the confrontation with Artemis.
Yeah.
2 instances out of an entire year in real life almost where that event is not mentioned.
Yeah, and when you put it in that perspective, you kind of get the feeling that the creator sort of lost track of that plot point as well, because just, you know, not every creator has to do this, but something we like to tell, like, really overly complicated stories, sometimes to our own detriment, where it's like, this is too complicated, there's no way you're going to pull this off, you have way too many ideas. So what we do to rein it in a little bit is we make a spreadsheet, right? An Excel or Google Sheets spreadsheet where you have your arc notes, your idea dumps, your story beats, your characters, that you can keep track of everything, and then the timing and pacing as to when you have your reveals going. And like for me, I wrote a character who was basically suicidal at the beginning of the story, and that's not something, it's a heavy topic, it's not something you can just throw in there and then forget and have the character acting all hunky-dory like at chapter 9 if you
for
do
a year.
Yeah, you know, for a year. A year's worth of material, and then remember, like, and then he confesses to somebody, oh yeah, you know, the reason I was at that place and time was because I was going to commit suicide. It's something that you have to stay on top of because it's heavy, and it's like a really traumatic
sensitive
thing.
topic.
Yeah, it's a sensitive topic, but it's a traumatic thing that happens to a character that's going to be weighing on their mind for a long time, you know. And so you definitely want to stay on top of that sort of thing. And it just looks like she wasn't able to stay on top of it because, like, so much happened because she was covering the minutia of every single day, every single hour of every single day, because she couldn't conceive of what would happen in the meantime, because she was always, you know, felt a sense of urgency to get to the very next thing happening instead of giving it some breathing room, that she forgot to stay on top of these things.
I honestly get the feeling that she's writing it an episode at a time. Even in season 1, you know, some people think that that's only a thing with season 2, season 3, but even in season 1, she's clearly just writing it an episode at a time. There's so many plot threads that are introduced, forgotten. There's no real setup and payoff that you would expect to see, where it's like, in this chapter I'm setting this up, in this chapter that's when it comes to, you know, the chickens come home to roost. So yeah, all that to say that in chapters 40, when she arrives at Underworld Corp, to 70, there's probably more panels of, actually no, there's definitely more panels of Hades internally panicking over how hot Persephone is than there are panels of Persephone ruminating on actual trauma.
Yeah.
In episode 43, Hades declines Persephone's internship. You know, I don't want Persephone to be working here because I'm really attracted to her and this is dangerous and I don't want to be around her. Basically, you know, I'm broken. I'm the broken, emo, Byron-esque man stereotype, and I don't want to taint her with my baggage. So then she says, we can play chess for it. This is another example of me speculating that these chapters are written panel to panel, because the chessboard was nowhere to be seen until the panel where Persephone said, we can play for it, and then you zoom out and show a chess set. And I kept paging back and forth going like, where is this chess set? And it's first introduced when she says we can play for it, and then there's the chess set in the foreground, and then the next panel there's the chess set in this cabinet. But this cabinet wasn't even in previous panels. I literally went back to check. There's no cabinet in previous panels in the background. You know, the background doesn't have anything in it that would indicate that there's a chess set in this room somewhere. So yeah, I mean, that's just another example And there's so many examples of this happening where something is introduced later in the chapter, but there was no setup. There's no, you could have started this chapter with them talking over a chess set. If they were going to play chess at the end of the chapter, you could have started with them talking.
Yeah.
With the chess set in the foreground and them in the background to introduce the idea that there's a chess set in this room.
Yeah.
Or shown it on the table between them because they're sitting next to a coffee table. You could have put the chess set there, but she didn't. So it's just very clear to me that this is being written. And it's being written as it's being drawn. Literally, she draws a panel, and then she's like, what should happen next? And then she draws the next panel. Yeah. I believe that's how this comic is being written. It was written like that from the very beginning, and I believe it's still being written like that, 4 years later.
Yeah, but that's odd because, people who are creators, they say that there is a 4-month planning period where they make all the assets for the series, they write out the entire series plot beats, and then they, go episode by episode and do summaries of what's going to happen in each episode. And, the reason they, confirm the existence of that time period is because they say that that's an unpaid time period. That's all for pre-production. So does she not do pre-production for her comic?
I mean, from what I can tell, there wasn't really a break between season 1 and season 2.
Oh.
And then season 3, there was a break. So there have been hiatuses recently, but in season 1, season 2, I believe, it was being produced all at the same time. But I think in general, Webtoon in the intervening years has required more of that planning and pre-production from their creators. And it just seems like they were really lax with the earlier creators. And it seems like nowadays they're lax as well because it's like, these are the cash cows, We're not going to force our cash cows to go through the same process that the plebeians do. And another thing that's really interesting is that I found indications where Rachel confirms that she only has a 3-episode buffer. And the 3-episode buffer is her fast pass.
Oh, no.
But you see other creators who are forced to have, months worth of buffer.
Yeah.
3 months worth of buffer.
9 episodes.
9 episodes, and that's just not the case for her, and I can only assume it's because she gets different treatment because she's the #1 webtoon on the site.
I guess so.
But that would explain, the declining quality, because you can't... If in the beginning, maybe if you had a lot of passion, a lot of ideas, because you've been thinking about this idea for years, because, again, season 1 is take 2. She had already done this on Tumblr. So she probably came up with a bunch of ideas in the intervening period before it became a Webtoon original. But, 4 years later, you kind of lose steam. You're not constantly thinking about your story because you don't have passion for it as much anymore. That's why having a plan comes in handy, because you know what should happen next according to your plan. And if she never did that, if she never took the time to plan it out, and she also doesn't have passion for it, where she's not constantly thinking about it anymore, now you can kind of see where the decline comes from.
Yeah.
Because not only is the story kind of all over the place, like it is in season 1 even, but now there's not even the cutesy moments that the season was known for, or not the season, the series was known for, because she's just not passionate about it and she doesn't think about that stuff anymore.
Yeah, she doesn't have all the headcanons
No,
going.
she doesn't have the headcanons going. So anyway, they play chess to determine whether or not she can work at his corporation, and she hustles him because, even though she said Hades is the only person who respects me, apparently he thinks she's a bimbo, and that's why he didn't take her seriously enough when they played chess. He was like, sure, I can win, because she's a dummy. Yeah. I like the horsey one the best.
Yeah.
And then she wins anyway, because she's actually really smart. And then Persephone goes to the roof because she's never seen snow before, and
that's the end of that.
That's the end of that. They've known each other for 4 days, but Hades is thinking that he's in huge trouble. The next chapter, they have an all-hands meeting, and this just brings up a point that I wanted to state. As somebody who's worked in corporate, it's the whole corporate internship angle is just very, it's not realistic at all.
It's very Shondaland.
It's very Shondaland. It's very dramatic, very
Bollywood movie.
They even have and everyone clapped, an all-hands meeting to introduce a new intern. First of all, I don't think an intern would be working directly under the CEO. She would probably be assigned to marketing or finance or something as an intern, and then depending on what her major is, and then
even Minty calls it out. She goes, "Since when did
interns receive all staff formal introductions?" They don't. In real life, they wouldn't, unless as Thanatos suspected, she's just his girlfriend, and that's why he's giving her so much special treatment, and he's not far off the mark.
Yeah.
And then Persephone and Hades are acting extremely inappropriate considering his girlfriend is right there. Minty is. Minty's ticked off. And Persephone doesn't say that Minthy is the reason that she ended up in Tower 4. And then Hades drives her home after her first day at work and brings up the paparazzi thing. And she says it's not a big deal. Apollo sees them and he gets like ticked off because he is somehow laboring under the delusion that Persephone is his girlfriend.
I mean, how can she be like, I don't really care about the paparazzi because I know what the truth is, but then also be like, he's just gonna think I'm a dumb village girl.
Her character is very inconsistent. I mean, the fact that she says, like, you know, does he really like me? But then in episode 61, she's like ready to lay a smooch on him. Her boss, the second day of working with him, is just so unprofessional and unrealistic.
Yeah.
In episode, like I'm saying, like episode
49.
Episode 45, the entire episode is Hades freaking out over how much he wants to bang Persephone.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like this for the aftermath of the assault.
No.
It's literally an entire episode
yeah.
from Hades' perspective, and it's also weird, like, not only the assault, but it's also weird that we don't get anything like this from Persephone's perspective.
No.
Like, we don't get anything, you know, we don't really get many panels of Persephone saying, like, oh, Hades is so hot.
No.
I don't know if I can work with Hades, because it's almost like she feels no, like, attraction to him.
She doesn't, like that.
It's very strange. Like,
Yeah.
she feels no actual attraction to him. She just thinks Hades is kind of neat.
Yeah, she goes, he's nice. I like the way he makes me feel. And he kind of looks into her backstory a little bit, but the thing that creeps me out is when he's in the shower and he says her butt is shaped like a heart.
Yeah. How does he know what her butt is shaped like?
I don't know, but it's like, that very much reminds me of, like, again, one of those things where it's like, she wanted to have that line in the story, so she, like, snuck it in there, even though it doesn't make sense for his character or for Persephone's character, you know, like, it doesn't really make sense for him to talk about her like that.
Yeah, it does, because he was talking about her like that at the strip club.
Yeah, but Hera chewed him out for that, and then he goes, well,
yeah, he's supposed to be a gentleman.
Yeah, he's like, well, I mean, I wouldn't, and not only that, but he's also supposed to be, like, an old, distinguished guy, you know, and it's like an old, distinguished guy.
You made me glimpse her in her underthings.
Yeah, you know, an old, distinguished guy wouldn't talk about a heart-shaped butt, you know, like, that just seems like, it would be, like, funny and cutesy if he was, like, a teenager, like, if they were both, like, college students, you know, 19, 20, whatever. And it's like, well, that's, like, a funny, like, childish thing to say, because he's got, like, a crush on her. But the fact that he's, like, a 40-something-year-old man, I think she said he's supposed to be, like, in his 40s. Like,
she said he's supposed to be in his mid-40s.
Yeah, like, a 40-something-year-old man saying that kind of stuff is just man-child behavior.
Well, about a 19-year-old.
Predatory man-child behavior, you know?
At the end of the episode, Minthy comes over, and you find out that the reason that Minthy didn't go to the party with him 4 days earlier in the comic, but almost a year earlier in real life, you find out that the reason she didn't go to the party with him was because she was scared that he was proposing, even though they're not in an official relationship, and she also doesn't like how his family treats her.
No. His
family constantly denigrates her and insults her, and she doesn't like the being in the public eye, and she's scared of the pressure. And this whole sequence just makes Minthy so much more sympathetic. And this keeps happening where it's like, wow, I feel really bad for Minthy. You know, just be the jerk. That's what everyone expects anyway. I just feel so bad for her.
The audience hates her.
I know the audience hates her.
Like, even after this flashback, they hate her.
Because she's getting in the way of the main relationship.
But I think that's really, like, not... I think that's really messed up.
She's a really sympathetic character. She's upset because she thinks he's cheating on her.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so then at the end of this chapter, Hades decides to stay with Minthy and reaffirms his relationship to her, and in fact makes them exclusive.
And then he starts channeling that at work. And
then he starts trying to avoid Persephone at work. And then we get to episode 47, and again, it's another episode from Hades' perspective, and this is the second episode that you get Hades' internal monologue about how he feels about Persephone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, there's nothing like this on Persephone's part. There's no episode talking about how much she likes Hades and how infatuated she is with him. It's just all from Hades' perspective, which is so bizarre. Like, as the audience, I naturally empathize with, or I'm naturally supposed to be empathizing with Persephone because she's the main female character and it's a female-targeted romance. So why are we getting so many cuts to Hades' point of view. And then you also have, I think this sequence is pretty well done, where Hestia shows up and like waves the paparazzi picture in front of Persephone and says, you know, what are you doing with Hades? You know, I'm taking this coat away from you.
Yeah.
I thought that was well done because it's all visual storytelling with no dialogue.
Yeah, you can understand what she's saying, basically.
Everything from just body language.
Yeah, from the setup before with the scholarship, you can understand what she's saying and what she's talking about through the visuals. I just don't like that it's through the lens of Hades and his letter. You know?
It's all from Hades' point of view. It's very, like, it's very dehumanizing for Persephone. It's very much like Persephone, the most important part about Persephone is the Persephone that exists in Hades' mind.
Yeah.
You know, it's very much like women only exist to be viewed in the lens of men. You know, like that famous quote where it's like, even when I'm alone, I think about how men think of me. I view myself how men view me. Mm-hmm. It's very, like, it's not pleasant to read on a second read through and realize you get more internal monologuing and more peeks into Hades' psyche than you do in Persephone.
Yeah, it's like the ideal, I guess, you know, you could say it's one of those things where it's like, if you are attracted to a guy, you hope that he's thinking about you.
All the time.
Yeah, like all the time. I think his reaction to the paparazzi thing, I think these character designs are really cool. The three sisters who have the snakes.
Megara and then the other two sisters.
I think it's really
cool. The Furies?
Yeah, they have really cool designs. But I think getting... And I like the fact that they say he looks like her dad, because that's what I thought too. I mean, when I first heard
We're talking about the next episode now. We moved on from episode
47.
We're on 48. And Hades gets calls Alecto and then Megara, and I think that's Medusa. I'm not sure. But he calls these three employees of his to track down the photographer of the paparazzi picture.
Yeah.
And I really like their designs, and I actually really like Megara. Like, honestly, again, like, this is another hot take, but I think Megara is more of a sympathetic character than Persephone. If you wanted to have a romance between Hades and his employee, Megara, like, really likes Hades, and she's kind of pathetic about it, and it's much more relatable. Because she's not, like, this super innocent Disney princess who's, like, sexy without knowing it. You know, Megara's just like, oh, yeah, I wrote a diary about all the times Hades talked to me. And it's so, like, it's like she's a cute character. She's relatable. She's kind of a loser and a nerd, you know?
I mean, that would have been, like, a funny, interesting story, you know, to have it, like, a workplace romance like that. But it obviously wouldn't have been the story of, like, Hades and Persephone.
But you could have made Persephone like that. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, if Persephone had a crush on Hades and it was one-sided and he didn't give her the time of day, like, you had that time skip where he, like, says, okay, I'm affirming my relationship to Minty. I'm committed to Minty. And then a month passes and Persephone becomes, like, obsessed with Hades, and you see that she's, like, keeping a diary about how much he talks to her.
Yeah.
You know, that would be, like, funny and relatable, because we don't get anything like that. It's almost like Persephone doesn't even like him. It's so distant.
It's like she doesn't feel romantic attraction
You don't
to anybody.
see her, like, perspective, and, like, you don't see how much she likes Hades and how obsessed she is with him at all in the story.
No.
It's kind of wasting your time, though.
It
like,
is.
There's a lot of panels where you show Megara's perspective and you show these characters interacting, but it doesn't further the overall story. And I think these guys don't really come back in a major way they're definitely not in season 2 or season 3. I don't think.
Wow.
I don't think these characters ever come back.
What a waste.
Yeah.
But they capture the guy, but I think he's the roommate of the guy that Persephone is tutoring.
But that also doesn't really... I mean, what's the payoff of that?
I don't know. When I read that line, I was like, so all green people know each other then?
No, it's very confusing, because, like, he's like, oh yeah, this paparazzi guy just happens to be my roommate, so I guess he's a college kid? I mean, it's just like, why would you include that? What was the point of that?
All green people know each other, that's what it is.
But, like, I think later on, he, like, gets scared of Persephone because Hades takes that guy's eye out.
I mean, you could have gotten scared of Persephone anyway because Hades took that guy's eye out.
Yeah, it could have just been, like, in the news or something.
Yeah.
They didn't have to know each other. So then, this is, like, the 5th day of after Hades and Persephone meet for the beginning of the comic. Persephone tutors him, and like every guy in this comic has a crush on her.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Except for Thanatos. That's another reason I like him. Because he's, like, the only guy who doesn't have a crush on her. And then Hecate and Hades
Again, their entire conversation is all about Hades and Persephone.
Yeah.
It's not about anything else.
Well, not only that, but Hecate yelled at Hades for pursuing Persephone because she's young, like Hera did. But then 2 episodes later, she's trying to set them up.
She did the reverse Uno.
Yeah, that's what Hera did too. It's like every character goes like, "What's wrong with you? She's 19." Like 2 episodes later, they like try to set them up. Mm-hmm. And yeah, by this point, Hades knows that she's 19. And then Hecate's saying stuff like, "You clearly have feelings for her, though," and they just met. They just met 5 days ago.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? Is it really obvious? Like, he's 45. You know? I'm, like, not even that old, and I would never act like this to a guy that I thought was attractive, that I had one conversation with.
It's like very... It's like, when you... It's like, I guess it's one thing when you read it on a webtoon, and this is another thing that we were always thinking about when it comes to webtoons, because the medium is so limited for telling a cohesive story, and it seems like a lot of times the readers just read these chapters like really briefly. They don't look at the panels too often, or they don't read it too closely, and the fact that it comes out on a weekly basis means that you have to have a separation of time between when you watch episodes, so you're not noticing all the inconsistencies all at once unless you binge something,
well,
right?
Not only that, but it's not voiced.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like the same thing where it's like, if you read something out loud, it seems much more ridiculous than if you just read it in your head.
Yeah, like, you know, I thought this chapter was ridiculous.
I thought the chapter where they take out his eye and they're like...
That's this chapter.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And they're joking around and she's passing him love letters. It's kind of like trying to be, like, cutesy and irreverent. But it's like, dude, they're, like, joking around right before they take this guy's eye out.
Yeah.
It's, like, very sociopathic, like Cha-Cha and Hazel from... Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
Like, literally 2 sociopaths, psychopaths, who are just, like, casually ripping eyeballs out. I remember when I first read this, I was so put off. I was like, what the heck?
Not only that, but
he took out this guy's eye for no reason.
The charges are BS. Like, the charges of, like, yeah, you're, they say that you're defaming Persephone.
Yeah.
By publishing a defamatory piece. She's not a nymph, she's a goddess, so that's defamatory. And then they say you trespassed onto Hades' private property to take that picture, so that's also illegal. And then they're also saying that the last thing was that, you're causing damage against Underworld Corporation by, like, tarnishing the image or something. Like, I can't remember what the third thing was, but it was those 3 things. And it's like, if what he's doing is illegal, why don't you take him to court over that instead of taking his eyeball out?
Here's the thing. At the end of season 2, there's a big trial, and there's no trial here.
No.
So it's extremely inconsistent from a world building standpoint.
If they've got him on every point, and what he did was illegal, and they can do this, like, yeah, point number 1, illegal, point number 2, illegal, point number 3, why are they taking his eyeball out?
No, the other thing is, if, like, Hecate is just the chief of HR.
Yeah.
So why does she keep saying my client? Is she also a lawyer?
I don't know. If she is a lawyer, again, why not just sue the guy? And run him out of business.
It's like she wanted to have a Greek act of wrath from a Greek god, but it's like, it's so out of place with the morality that we've set up so far, which is parallel to real life, our universe's morality.
Yeah, what would have been better is if he found out about Apollo and took Apollo's eye out.
Yeah.
Because that's something where it's like a he said, she said.
Yeah.
And Apollo could be like, no, she consented, she told me. And then he's like, consent and coerce. Coerced consent is not consent. You friggin' a-hole.
Mm-hmm.
And then he could have taken his eye out, and that would have been like,
yeah,
like, that's pretty,
But yeah, that chapter was like totally pointless because it doesn't really affect anything in the end.
No.
And then this is episode...
It's 50. It's
episode 50, where Artemis and Apollo are talking, and she's like, what did you do to Persephone? And then Apollo narks on Persephone being with Hades.
Well, no, she doesn't ask him, what did you do to Persephone? She says, she basically tells him that Hestia got upset about the paparazzi thing, and he's like, super gleeful about that. And he goes, I don't think Persephone's taking her duties very seriously.
Yeah, he narks on her, and he, like, tries to, like, sow doubt in Artemis's head.
But it's silly because it's like Artemis, was a lot more perceptive earlier in the comic, and now she's just kind of believing everything he says.
I mean, that's kind of like par for the course. Again, it's like there's a desired outcome, and then the characters are twisted to fit that outcome.
Yeah.
Artemis was more of a character in the beginning, but like the last 20 chapters have passed and she hasn't been in the story.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like that's another big problem with these webtoons is like Let's Play has the same issue where there's such a large cast that like characters get dropped for like 10, 20 episodes, and it's like, it doesn't seem like a big deal when you're binging it, but that's 20 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, that's like 5 months.
I mean, people who read my comic notice things, or they notice like characters reacting to certain things within like one episode of each other, and they like comment about it, you know?
Yeah,
so
and that's why it's beneficial to keep your cast limited. You can never tell Game of Thrones
No.
as a webtoon.
Exactly.
Like, you just can't have a large cast of characters and like follow different storylines with that, because of the nature of the fact that it's like each chapter has to be short because it's full color. You just can't. Anyway, we cut to Hermes, and Hermes also has a crush on Persephone.
Does he really?
Well, because he's like practicing. I think we should go to work together, and he's like blushing.
I didn't get that when I read that part.
I think he has a crush on her. In the earlier episode where he's like with Apollo, it seems like he doesn't have a crush on her, but when he comes here and he's like you know, like watching her change, and like with the blush and like his eyes, I think he has a crush on Persephone. Pretty sure he has a crush on Persephone. Did you know that Hermes is based on her real life partner?
No.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't keep up with the lore of Lore Olympus.
And then this is where you reveal that Persephone, like, is naked in front of Hermes all the time, but in the beginning of the comic, she was, like, scared to wear that really short dress at the party. And then Artemis says, like, why do you have guys in this house constantly? And then it ends on a cliffhanger of Persephone saying, like, Apollo's here all the time, and let me tell you something about your brother. But then it's like a fake out because she doesn't actually tell him anything. Yeah,
because she says she doesn't want to hurt Artemis by telling her that. But again, it's inconsistent, because it's like, you know, you don't want to hurt Artemis by telling her about her brother, but then, I mean, she was overly familiar with Hades and saying, like, how come you're not married yet?
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that. So it's like, which is it? I don't know. I don't know how her thought process works at all, because we don't have those long chapters that are entirely...
We have so many long episodes from Hades' POV, but we don't have anything like that from Persephone.
Yeah, so I really don't know what her logic is and how she, like, comes to the conclusions that she comes to at all.
And then Persephone arrives back at the Underworld, and Hecate shows her the library. I thought this panel was really nice.
With the library?
Yeah, that was a really good piece of art. But they're kind of slowing down as the story, like, goes on. And, you know, the last really nice sequence was in Tower 4, which was chapter 40, 41, 42, 43. And this is episode 50. And this is the next really nice sequence that we get. So it's kind of becoming fewer and far between as the episodes go on. Obviously, the composition and color is still really good, but there's no, like, scenes where you're going like, wow, that was really nice, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I really like the fantasy sequences, and as the story goes on, as Lore Olympus goes on, there's fewer of them, which is just kind of a shame.
Yeah, so then you have the Persephone, Hades, and Minthe in the elevator. She tries to give him some baklava.
And he says, I can't accept that. And then Minthe comes in and rubs her relationship in Persephone's face, and Persephone gets jealous. And we get a nice image of her putting Minthe in a cage, which is really cool, but it's also funny that Persephone says, you know, did Hades give her a comb too? And, you know, there's a few episodes later from Minthe's POV showing her backstory with Hades, and it's kind of like, oof, you know?
Yeah, like a sign of things to come.
You know, I mean, he just has, like, a pattern of, like, love bombing women that he's interested in with expensive gifts. But yeah, Persephone tries to offer... She offers Hermes baklava, and Thanatos gets some too. And then Hecate comes in, and this whole sequence is very, like, again, it's something where it's like, you know, the creator was like, I want to have this really funny scene of them all in an elevator, and it's going to be awkward but funny.
Yeah.
And it's like, this doesn't add anything to the story.
No, there's a big disagreement, or a big, like, argument that she doesn't have a driver's license, and he's like, but you drove my car. And then I was sitting there and I was reading that, and I was like, what is this doing for the story? Because it's like, you know, there's so many instances of Persephone talking to characters about how much she likes Hades, or like, I do not. And then Hades talking to other characters about like, oh, you like Persephone, don't you? I do not. And then when they finally interact with each other, you're expecting like more than that, more than an argument about her not having a driver's license.
I don't think there's a single substantial conversation between Hades and Persephone in the first 70 episodes.
Yeah.
He's either, like, talking to her in the kitchen, and they're just, like, talking generally about stuff, and like he's being weirdly flirtatious.
Yeah.
And then he talks to her on the phone. I guess that was their first real conversation, when he talks to her on the phone.
At 2 a.m.
At 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And then he, like, talks to her about not having a driver's license and rescues her from the tower, but that's not really a conversation. And then he shows her around the underworld. But again, that's not really a conversation. That's just like, hey, this is the underworld, you know?
Yeah, the weird thing about the kitchen conversation, way back earlier on, I think in the first 10 episodes or something, was that when her hair grows super long, she goes, "Can you help me with this?" And he goes, "We can do this in the kitchen." But
oh yeah, he's so inconsistent, because in the first, when he first meets her in the kitchen, he like thinks they're gonna have sex.
Yeah.
In the kitchen, and then later on, he's like super prudish and like, "Oh, I glimpsed her in her underthings." Yeah, that's again like she imagined a conversation and she just kind of contorts the characters to fit the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like these characters wouldn't necessarily act like that from how you set them up.
Yeah.
But that's just how they act because she wanted that particular outcome.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, twisting the situation to fit the outcome and the character interaction.
And then Hades decides to give her a tour. Or no, Hecate convinces Hades to give her a tour of the underworld.
Yeah, because she's double booked, and so she...
But she was lying. She's just playing matchmaker.
Yeah, but it's like, why is everybody playing matchmaker? Why do their lives revolve around these two characters?
More internal screaming.
Yeah, because, yeah, she can't keep up with him. And,
I don't know why he was internally screaming about that. Is he like a size fetishist? Is it like in Mission Impossible 2 where Tom Cruise keeps talking about Thandie Newton's weight?
I don't know, but I mean...
Do you remember that? That was so weird.
It was weird, but you know, now that you mention it, when they're at the strip club, it's really gross. They have that interaction. They say, "How would you guys even do it? Like, she's so tiny." And he goes, "She could get on top. I don't care," you know? And it's like... You know? Like, and then you have the scene when they're playing the chess. He, like, takes up the entire armchair, and she's sitting in it with her legs dangling off the end.
It's so weird. The framing is so
Yeah.
weird.
And it's like...
I don't like their size difference. It's creepy.
No, it's not just the size difference. It's like
it's
everything.
the fact that she acts like a child when she's like, "I can't keep up with you." Like the panels where she's like, you know, framed with the tiny coat and her little pixie cut. She looks like a kid.
Yeah. And, you know, there's like the experience gap, the age gap, the size gap, you know.
The power gap because he's king.
Yeah, the power gap.
The employee boss gap.
Yeah.
It's like, what next? Are you gonna just make her his slave? Like, you're just gonna go the full route and disempower her as much as possible by making her a slave?
There's also the economic status gap. She has no money. He has a lot of money.
No, but also sophistication. The cultural sophistication gap, because she's from the mortal realm and he's from the underworld.
I'm surprised they even speak the same language.
I know, right?
A language
she
barrier.
should have like a thick, like hillbilly accent.
Yeah, throw in a really big language barrier, and then, you know...
Oh yeah, episode 54, so we get Hera disguised as a paparazzo taking a picture of Persephone, and then she gets a flashback to Apollo. But I don't understand, what was the point of the reveal that this paparazzi guy was Hera?
I don't know.
Nothing happens with that.
No. I mean, there was a part where Hades asked her, like, "Where's your wrath? Like, how come you're not angry about this?" So I guess that was when he was driving her back home, I think, from the internship at first, where he showed her the paparazzi picture and she's not upset about it, and he goes, "Where's your wrath?" And I think they're kind of like, you know, foreshadowing that a little bit.
But it could have been just another paparazzi guy.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why it had to be Hera. And if he pulled the other guy's eyeball out, why wasn't he upset at this paparazzi person?
Because this paparazzi person is Hera.
But I'm like, it's just so inconsistent. Because if he was so mad that a paparazzi person was taking a picture of Persephone and him.
Well, also that paparazzi person trespassed.
But this person's like on, like right next to the Underworld Corp.
Yeah, but that person trespassed on his property, so.
It just doesn't.
That's the eyeball clause.
Like, if he was so angry the first time, how come he wasn't angry the second time? That he was invading privacy. It just doesn't make any sense. And then, yeah, there's more conversations about, like, why didn't you get more angry? But episode 53 is called The Tour, but I don't, like, the tour lasts, like, 5-6 episodes. It pretty much lasts till episode 59.
Yeah.
So, 7 episodes. Episode 59 is pretty cool. 59 and 60, there's a lot of really cool imagery about the underworld. But again, there's, like, so much time wasted with, like, I don't have anything suitable to wear. Go change, you know, like, there's just so many, like, You didn't have to have that conversation. You could have just shown them wearing mortal clothes. Literally just cut to them in the underworld wearing mortal clothes. She's like, I don't understand why I had to change. You know? And he's like, oh, the mortals get confused, so you had to change into mortal clothes because if we eased them into it. You could have just done that.
Yeah.
And it's another indication of, like, wasting time.
Yeah.
And Thanatos and Minthy are complaining to Hecate about Persephone's, like, obvious preferential treatment, and Thanatos characterizes it pretty well when he's like, Persephone is just, like, his sugar baby, and that's why she's getting preferential treatment. And it's like, yeah, that's pretty accurate. And then Hecate tells them to get a grip and tells Minthy to stop being unprofessional, which is just like, she's like, this isn't high school. But it's like, Hecate, you just played matchmaker to get Hades to show Persephone around. So what is that if not high school?
Yeah.
Like, that is so hypocritical.
And not only that,
you were trying to set up Hades and his teenage intern, and you're criticizing Minthy for being jealous when you know that he's in a relationship with Minthy.
Yeah.
So, like, who's in high school now? You know?
You're in high school.
Exactly.
You're in high school. But I think another thing that's kind of lame is that all of the quote-unquote, villainous coded characters are the ones who are critical of the relationship.
Of course.
And all of the good characters...
No, not just critical of the relationship. They're all the characters who don't like Persephone.
Yeah.
They're just all the characters who don't like her. It's like Apollo, Thanatos, and Minthy. They all don't like Persephone. They think she's annoying.
Yeah.
And they're all villains.
Yeah, and it's like, if you're telling a story, I mean, and you're trying to, like, have intrigue and have, like, a character you don't like, I don't think it's like a good thing story-wise to have that be the motivation for the bad characters, because I think you're eventually going to run out of road space when it comes to, like, how reasonable can these characters be to the point where they're not just Saturday morning cartoon villains. Right? Yeah. It's like, you have to have more of a motivation than that, right? Like,
I think Minthy has a heck of a motivation.
Yeah, Minthy does, but I'm saying, like, other characters, and Minthy's motivation, like, the thing that's messed up about it is that, like, sometimes the portrayal of it, and especially the fan interpretation of it, is very superficial. They just say Minthy bad in the way of OTP. I don't like
because Persephone is the POV character.
Yeah, and then people are talking about how Persephone is like a cinnamon roll, I think if you wanted to have characters who were, like, antagonistic characters, making them characters who get in the way of the main romantic relationship is, like, so boring, because it's like, how far can you go with that?
If there was a plot that tied them more into Kronos,
yeah,
because Kronos ends up being the big bad later anyway, that would make more sense.
Yeah.
Or if it was somehow more related, like, if you wanted to make Apollo the ultimate big bad, who's, like, trying to usurp Hades' position,
yeah,
that would have been more interesting, instead of, like, just jealous alpha girl and then, like, sour dude has no real stake in his fight.
Apollo,
I mean, he has a point. Like, Persephone's getting preferential treatment.
Yeah.
That's a legitimate point.
But I mean, like, Apollo has those pictures of Persephone that he took, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, you could have had something going with that, and...
You could have released that bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah, sooner.
Yeah, like, the internship and the paparazzi pictures. I mean, why not make it go full circle and have Apollo and the paparazzi working together, and then when they do get that guy in the warehouse... He could
be defaming Persephone and, like, leading the slut shame against Persephone.
Exactly.
And then so that she has no one to turn to except Apollo.
Exactly. And then you wouldn't be about, oh, I just don't want to see those two of them together. It would be more about, like, isolation and control. And if Persephone decides to... And then, like, if she tries to turn to Hades for help, and he's like, sorry, I can't, me and Minthy are a thing now, then she would feel even more betrayed by him and even more alone.
Yeah.
And then she would be like, well, okay, so I can't count on anybody but myself. And then you have a villain whose motivation isn't just to keep the main pairing apart from each other. It's more of, like, exerting control over one pair of the two, but in a way that is a lot more tangible and a way that makes a lot more sense, especially with what he's done so far in the story.
I agree. I agree completely. I think the whole Minthy and Thanatos thing is pretty shallow because they actually have very understandable perspectives, so there's no reason why they should be villainized.
Yeah.
I think the scene with Megara in episode... this is...
56?
Episode, 56? I mean, like, no wonder only a week passes in, like, a year in real time, because there's so much crammed in here. This entire conversation with Megara is pretty pointless. There's no real reason why the scene is here. Again, it just feels like there's no goal goal-structured writing. She's not writing with a goal in mind. She's just coming up with scenes, and then she puts them in her story, not considering how they add or detract from the overall narrative. It's just, you could have just cut to them wearing mortal clothes. That would have been so much better.
Yeah.
Just wasting our time. And then again, you get more internal panic from Hades over how hot Persephone is. It's just crazy, and she's all over him. And it's like, this doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense for somebody to be all over another person like that when they know they have a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And like when she's completely inexperienced, it doesn't really make any sense.
And she just got assaulted.
Yeah, she just got assaulted. And Hades is saying something like, if I knew you liked punishment, I'd put you in a different role, which is just creepy.
I mean, I don't know why she wouldn't think, after what happened with Apollo, like he was just being nice to her to, at the end of the day, like force himself on her.
Yeah.
Why she wouldn't also be suspicious of Hades.
It doesn't make sense why she immediately trusts Hades, and she doesn't have a total distrust of all men in general.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say, like, maybe she's, like, trying to convince herself that everything's fine and, like, trying to rush a relationship with Hades because she's trying to convince herself that she's not damaged goods. But again, like, none of that is in the text. That's me speculating for why she's acting this way. It just seems like the creator forgot that was a plot point and, like, only remembers when it's convenient because she doesn't want that to get in the way of the fluff.
Yeah.
Because the fluff is what's taking up most of our time right now.
Yeah.
The fluff and, like, random comedic interludes with other characters where they're like, you like Persephone. And then the other character is like, no, I don't.
Yeah. And this entire chapter is based around that interaction. Do you really think I'm powerful? I, for one, find you terrifying.
Yeah. This is like the 5th day that they know each other.
Yeah.
And they almost kiss in this episode.
It's 56.
No, it's like episode 56. They almost kiss, and it's like, why?
Yeah. It's because the fans want it.
I guess because it's been over a year in real time.
Yeah.
And it's like, when is it happening?
Hey, previously on Lower Olympus.
Yeah, because
Hera.
This was a plot line that was forgotten. Hera starts to...
She knows that somebody did something to Persephone, and she's trying to figure out who it is.
And this came up in, like, episode 30.
Yeah, it was like 30 something. I think like 30, 31,
so again,
32.
like 5 months earlier.
Yeah. Is Persephone purple? Yeah, she is purple in this chapter for a little bit, right?
I don't know.
That was that one panel. She was like purple.
Their colors just fluctuate a lot, but that's because that was a flashback.
No, but he's still blue. And she's purple.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Hera was the one who was the paparazzi, and then she asks Zeus if he suspects Apollo, and he thinks that Zeus is great. Persephone suddenly starts flying for no reason, except I think the creator was like, oh, this would be a great visual. And it is a great visual, but it's like, why can she fly all of a sudden?
Yeah.
Because Hermes had to fly her to work.
Yeah.
That morning, he had to fly her to work.
Yeah.
Like, literally 4 chapters before this, he had to fly her to work, and all of a sudden she's flying.
And then, somebody could say, well, obviously it's because she likes Hades, and she's, like, really happy right now. And it's
but
like,
again, I don't get that from her, because there's no chapters, there's no sequences from her POV.
Yeah, and it's like, that's you speculating. That's not in the text.
No, I never see chapters where she's like, oh, Hades is so hot, and, like, he's so nice to me.
Mm-hmm.
The sequence in the afterlife is just really cool. I like the imagery a lot. I like the colors a lot with the moon over the sun. I wish Lower Olympus had more of this. Again, like, more mythical stuff. It's, like, the best part of Lower Olympus, in my opinion. Hades is a slave owner. And,
what else is new?
And, like, and Persephone doesn't really react to that they have to pay to enter the afterlife. And then in, like, one of the later chapters, he says that, yeah, unpaid labor is how I got so wealthy. And then she's just spacing out because she thinks, Hades says, I think you're a fertility goddess. But it's like, I don't know why that's important. It's just, and it came out of nowhere. You're a fertility goddess.
She said if I was a fertility goddess, my mom would have told me.
Well, I think it came up actually during the phone call. If you're a fertility goddess, and then she said, oh, I'm not a fertility goddess.
No, I think it was during when she was in his office asking for the internship.
Yeah.
And he goes, you're a fertility goddess, and she goes, no, I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, if I was, my mom would have told me.
Right.
And then when he finds out that she's 19, he goes, oh my god, did I misconstrue this entire situation? I'm such an idiot. Fertility goddess, what was I thinking?
Right. Yeah. Episode 62 picks up with Hera and Zeus. What do you think of Apollo? And then Zeus, like, is a jerk who's a narcissist who thinks he's great.
Well, he basically says, you know, if you bring out these allegations against Apollo, you're going to ruin his reputation, and that is going to reflect poorly on us and make us look like we don't know how to choose Olympians, because the mortals like him, he's doing a good job, and if you ruin his reputation with this allegation, you know, it's going to make us look like we're incompetent, basically. Mm-hmm. And she goes, well, what about Persephone? He calls her a B-grade goddess from the mortal realm, so they kind of look down on her.
Yeah.
And I guess if they really wanted to, like, bring it back to Persephone's worries about herself, what he should have said was, she's some dumb village girl. What do I care about her?
Right.
Instead
of to really hit it on the head.
Yeah, the B-grade goddess thing is like, okay, you can call her B-grade goddess, but why didn't you call her a dumb village girl? Mm-hmm. You've used that line like 3 times so far in the series. Like, that was a good place to use it. But yeah, this is the part that you were talking about where he talks about the financial benefits of ongoing unpaid labor in a cutesy hee-hee-ha-ha way.
He's a slaver, confirmed.
Yeah.
And then he even says it twice.
Because she's not paying attention.
But he even admits that he's a slaver twice. And then she's concerned about the fact that he said that she was a fertility goddess. Why would my mother hide something like that from me? If you wanted to be a virgin for all eternity, then it would be, like, good for you not to know. And then, basically...
They have a discussion where she says, look, you know, I need to know where I am, like, what my standing is with you, right? And that's, like, drilling down into, like, the more, how does she feel about him? How does he feel about her?
Well, not only that, but before that, he says that if you're a fertility goddess, then you might get attacked for that.
Yeah. So that, I mean, he said that the reason the Shades attacked her was because she's a fertility goddess, and they felt threatened by that. Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, no, that's not true. But when he says, just stay away from Tower of Whirl until we get to the... He never finishes that thought. He never comes back to it.
I think it was a typo.
Like, until we get to the... And then that's it. And then, like, there's, like, 10 speech bubbles that go by, and they never go back to that.
No, it's a typo.
Yeah, and then there's the montage of her getting grabbed, and then...
By guys. Yeah. Male gods. I think that it's implied that fertility goddesses are, like, uncontrollably attractive or something, which is just, like...
That's like, you know...
Why would you put that in your comic?
Yeah, it's very predatory.
No, it's kind of like, I couldn't help it.
Yeah. Like,
I couldn't help it. She was just so attractive.
That's what I'm saying. It's like victim blamey and predatory.
Yeah, it's creepy.
You know?
Yeah, so he's explaining the fertility goddess thing, kind of implying that people will be uncontrollably attracted to her. And then he says, I'll help you if you ever get in trouble. And then she says, I don't know, like, you're hot and cold. But, like, again, only 5 days have passed. It's not like it's been a month where he's been ignoring her, which was why I think that would be better. Like, just have a month time skip. He's ignoring her. Get rid of Megara's character and make Persephone the dweeb who has, like, a ridiculous crush on him. Because she's only 19.
Yeah.
Like, she's 19. She's gonna have, like, stupid... It seems like Hades is the one who has a ridiculous crush on her, and she just kind of thinks he's, like, pretty neat.
Well, maybe that's why it's a deconstruction.
But it just seems like Persephone doesn't have a character.
I know. That's
like,
why,
we don't get anything from her at all.
That's why it's a deconstruction of a story where you expect 2 people to have characters.
I've seen so many, like, the media about an old man having a crush on a beautiful young woman from his POV. That's, like, the standard. That's the bog standard. That's the 7-year itch. You know, that's, like, 10 with Bo Derek. That's, like, all of these movies. You know, what was that movie with Michael Douglas? Fatal Attraction? That's like all of these movies. Middle-aged man has a crush on a young, beautiful woman from his POV. That's like the most mainstream you can get. That's not deconstructive at all. But anyway, yeah, in this chapter, he says, I'll help you. And then episode 59, she says...
They're at the vending machines.
They're at the vending machines. He's still supposed to be giving a tour of the Underworld. This is the second day of her work on the job.
Yeah.
This is like 5 days after they met. And we've covered... 1 day over 10, 12 chapters.
Yeah, but what do you think the fans are thinking of this interaction between these two? And what's with the pomegranate?
It's because in the original myth, she eats the pomegranate, and that's why she's in the Underworld.
Yeah, but, like, why is it called Pomegranate X Series?
It's probably an energy drink.
What does Underworld Corp do?
I don't know.
What is Pomegranate X Series?
I don't know.
What is it?
I have no idea. And this is a chapter where she says, let me know where I stand with you.
Yeah.
And then she says, I'm overly familiar with people because I used to sleep under the stars. and
I like holding
people's hands, and I'm touchy-feely. I used to have, like, nymph friends that I would, like, sleep with and bathe with and all this stuff, and Hades is, like, getting, like, friggin' turned on, I guess. And it's just creepy, because, you know, she's very innocent and naive, and she's talking like a child. You know, this is like children who grew up in the 1940s and played outside all the time, and Hades is like, oh, sounds sexy.
Oh, no.
I mean, the sequence is really nice. The colors are beautiful. It's like teal and pink and mint green. It's gorgeous. But, I mean, it's really nice, but Hades is, like, creepy. Yeah, he's, like, creepy. Hades is, like, invading her space, getting her a pomegranate soda. Again, like, there's so many panels of, like, nothing happening.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. What do you think the fans think of this interaction?
They loved it. It's fluff. Like, this whole comic, like, so far, this is, like, 60 episodes in, and a year in real time, and it's like, what's the story of Lore Olympus? Who's the main villain?
I mean, so far, like, if I had to tell you...
Is it slice of life? Is it fantasy?
Yeah, I don't really know. It's not really like a workplace drama, romance, right?
It just feels like things are happening.
Yeah. There's a lot of confusion for me between, like, what happens in, like, the mortal world and the regular world. I mean, you would think at the beginning with the party and everything, there'd be a lot more, like, glitz and glamour and paparazzi. But then it kind of takes a dive to being more workplace. And, yeah, so it's just kind of, like, tonally...
all over the place.
I don't know what the tone is supposed to be, so...
And then you get a sequence from Minty saying she didn't mean for any of that to happen to Persephone. So again, like, humanizing Minty when it's like... You just make me like Minty more. Like, then she calls Thetis and says, how do I deal with Hades cheating on me, basically. In episode 60, we established that Minty and Thanatos have, like, a workplace relationship going on where they just fool around.
Yeah.
Because she and Hades were never official.
Yeah.
But she tells Thanatos, like, we can't do this anymore because me and Hades are in an official relationship.
But that seems to come out of nowhere, because it's like...
Why is she in a relationship with Thanatos?
Yeah.
It adds nothing to the story.
Not only that, it just gives, you know, the people in the audience more fuel to be like, I hate both of them.
No, but it's not like she's cheating on Hades.
No.
Like, it's not like she continues to see Thanatos. She just says, now that I'm with Hades officially, we can't, like, fool around anymore.
But not only that, I mean, usually when people are fooling around, right, they'll give each other, like, a knowing look, like, you know, and, like, she's had panels with him before.
Yeah.
In previous chapters.
And there's nothing there.
There's no chemistry between them at all.
There's nothing to foreshadow that they like each other. Yeah.
Or, like, they're even physically attracted to each other, right?
It's just strange. It just came out of nowhere.
But it's like a cliffhanger where he turns on the light and it's like...
Yeah, I know.
Oh my god.
But I like the art when in episode 60 Persephone's thinking about Minty and that she's jealous of her. I like this art of Minty. I don't like that she's naked, but I like the, like, composition and the colors.
Yeah, the drippy art.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like Minty's character design. Persephone's super jealous of Minty, and I like the panel where she traps her in the box. I wish Persephone had more vindictiveness and anger and, like, more of a character in general. I think that would have been more interesting. And she speculates, like, did Hades give her a comb too? And again, it's like, you know, that is actually more of a condemnation of Hades than it is, like, a condemnation of Minty.
Yeah.
Because she's thinking, like, Hades is love bombing me. Does he love bomb Minty too? Does he treat Minty the same way he treats me? Because it seems like he's trying to get with me. Did he do the same thing with Minty? And it's like, if she were cynical, she'd be like, is this his playbook?
Yeah.
You know? So Persephone is getting insecure because...
But this is, like, the first chapter from Persephone's
point of view. I know, and we're 60 chapters in. But she decides not to rat Minty out, even though she could get Minty fired. And then, cut to Minty telling Thanatos that they can't be together anymore. And then Thanatos thinks that Hades is cheating on her with Persephone. Oh yeah, and then you include the fact that they're, like, mean girls. Thanatos, Thetis, and Minty are mean girls who, like, talk crap about other people.
Yeah.
But it's like, is that really, like, the end of the world to gossip about people?
No, because Persephone doesn't care about gossip.
No, but not only that, like, this is supposed to paint them all in a negative light. But it's like, a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Most people do that.
Yeah.
Then, basically, Again, this is like a lot of panels that you don't really need for advancing the story. They decide to team up against Persephone because they don't like her and they don't like the attention that she gets. Episode 61, Minthy interrupts Persephone and Hades and like brags about how great his cooking is. Again, so many wasted panels where it's like, if you've read this before and you're reading it, or if you've never read this before, you're like, you're reading these scenes and you're like, where is this going?
It's like looking into somebody's head and seeing that they didn't cut out any of the ideas that they had. Or it's like, where is this going? Because, you know, like I said, when I first started reading this, I tried to set up a tally of all the setups and where I expected them to lead. But then after a certain point, you just can't tell where the story is going.
No, because there's every chapter is set up. There's not very many payoffs in it so far at all.
Yeah.
Every single chapter introduces new plot lines, new characters.
Yeah.
And then we cut to Artemis for some reason, I guess, because she realized there'd been 20 chapters since Artemis had been in the story.
And then she's finally getting sus about Apollo.
But then she's talking to her cat instead of anything actually happening.
Yeah.
And then she baked Persephone a cake. This is day 2 of her job, by the way. And it took, like, 10 chapters.
Yeah.
Wait, this is episode 61. Yeah, 12 chapters for a single day. 12 weeks. 3 months. She baked Persephone a cake. She's sorry that she yelled at her. Persephone, Hestia's a jerk. You're not wrong. Persephone tells Artemis that she has a crush on Hades instead of telling her about what Apollo did.
Yeah.
And then Eros comes running just to get him back in the story because it's been 20 chapters. Oh, but first we cut to a flashback where Artemis was spying on Persephone in the mortal realm before she joins the goddesses of eternal maidenhood. And we get more between Demeter and Persephone being super sheltered. But again, it's like this is entering the story at the most random point. It's like there's a setup and there's no payoff. Yeah. And instead there's more setup.
Yeah.
Like where you expect a payoff to like the paparazzi thing or the eye being plucked out. Like the eye was plucked out like 30 chapters ago at this point.
Yeah. What happened to the eye?
What happened to the eye? What happened to Apollo?
Yeah.
What happened with, like, Minthy and Hades being back together?
Yeah.
There's just so much setup and not enough payoff. She just keeps setting more up.
What about Zeus and Hera?
Yeah, what about Zeus and Hera?
Hera knows, or she has a strong inkling that it's Apollo, and she's just sitting on that information. But, to be fair, it's only been,
a couple hours. Day. Yeah.
So, I mean, they don't really work that fast, I guess,
But it's
It's like what she's choosing to prioritize in this day-to-day cataloging of events is not actually pushing the story forward.
It's introducing more.
Yeah,
but more plots.
Yeah, I guess if you struggle with writing a story, though, and pacing, you would struggle, like, okay, but then...
How do I tie that up?
Not only how do I tie that up, but it's like, well,
what should happen next?
Not only what should happen next, but it's like, people live your lives. Like, when you live your life in day-to-day life, you can't skip forward a week at a time, right? You have to go through every agonizing minute of your life. The only time you get to skip is when you go to sleep, right? And that's how this comic is written.
But they have the most interesting lives ever of anyone I know in real life.
Oh my god. See, like...
So much happens in a single day in Lore Olympus.
But it doesn't have to, is the thing, right? The only reason it happens like that is because she can't conceive, or, like, she doesn't know how to write. Like, you can skip forward past a couple, weeks. It's like if I was doing a workplace romance thing, right?
It would cover at least a year.
At least a year, but, I would have the setup period be like a month. Because it's like when I worked at my job, I worked for a big company, right? And there were creepy guys at my company who were like, I don't know what this guy's intentions are, if he's trying to be nice or what. It's like the first day you get to your job, they don't ask you to go for lunch. That's maybe at the end of the third week.
Or the first week.
The first week, yeah. They're like, hey, you're new here. How about we go for lunch? And you go, okay. In the meanwhile, you're doing all the boring stuff where your brain is in neutral. And then when you get home at the end of the day, you do whatever you have to do. And then like a week later, this guy asks you for your phone number.
There could have been an interesting setup where she's trying to make friends with Thetis, Minthy, and Thanatos, and they're all ganging up against her, and she's getting bullied.
Yeah, what about Persephone finds out that Minthy and Thanatos have a thing going on at work, and then she's like, oh crap.
That would have been so much juicier.
Like, what do I do?
Or maybe she walks in on them in the closet or sees them in the closet, but Minthy's breaking it off, and she misinterprets it.
Yeah.
That would have been so much more interesting.
Like, yeah, if she's in the closet trying to, like, find some supplies for her desk or something, because she's like, nobody gave me a friggin' pencil or, like, a notebook to write with.
Oh, because I can't use the computer.
Yeah, so I need that. So she goes into the closet to get some supplies.
And then she hides.
Yeah, and she hides when she hears people come in, or she thinks, oh, that's Minthy, I'll just ask her, like, hey, where's the stuff? But then she sees she's, like, macking on Thanatos, and she goes,
Yeah.
Oh, what do I do? You know?
Add some tension.
And then she hides in the closet. And then she says, well, we can't keep doing this because of Hades, you know? And then she goes, Hades? Like, what?
Then that would actually make Minty a villain if that was your intention.
Exactly. And that would be like, oh my gosh, you know? And then you have that happen on, like, her 3rd week on the job, right? And then she's like, I feel like I should tell Hades because that's not right, you know? What's going on there? And then she could end up telling Hades, and it makes her look crazy, and Minty just gaslights her. Mm-hmm. Totally gaslights her. Like, she could have told Hades in private, and then Minty finds out, and then during a company meeting, she gaslights the heck out of
Embarrasses
Persephone.
her.
Embarrasses her during a presentation, makes her look like an idiot, and then Persephone leaves the room in tears. Yeah. And Hades can't do anything because he's official with Minty right now, you know?
Yeah.
That would have been like, whew, you know, geez. But instead, you got the pomegranate X.
No, and the other thing about the pacing is that it feels like more time is passing because there's so many panels of stuff happening.
Yeah.
And, like, there's so many panels of conversation that it's hard to believe that it's only, like, 2 days.
And that's why you have the question of, like, well, hang on a second. So much time has passed. How come they haven't resolved this plot line yet?
But in reality, it's only 2 days.
Yeah, and it's like, well, hang on. It's only been 2 days. You gotta pump the brakes. Let these guys find their bearings, you know?
So then episode...
It's a continued flashback.
63 is a continued flashback. The only thing that happens here is that Artemis says that Persephone can live with me, and it's very, like, again, it's like, this doesn't need to be introduced now. You don't have to show a flashback interrupting the action. They're setting up something here, too, because it's like, first they were like, how come Persephone's name changed from Corey to Persephone, which means bringer of death?
Yeah.
And then here they're like, how come Demeter went from not wanting Persephone to move to the Olympus to wanting her to get out of the mortal realm as fast as possible?
Right.
And then they also show, like, them fudging, like, Demeter cuts Hermes a deal where she's like, you better stay quiet about this or bad stuff will happen to you. Mm-hmm. And so, like, she's doing more setup.
Yeah.
When, like, none of the plot lines have been resolved so far.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like the problem that we had when we tried to write our last series. We came up with so many good ideas and, like, we were just setting up. Nothing was resolved by, like, the second season. It was just all set up. And I can't imagine being a reader, reading a series for 2 years and, like, nothing's been resolved. Everything's just hanging in the air. At this point, it's been, like, 30 episodes since Eros and Psyche. Eros and Psyche was, like, episode, like, 17.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's been, like, 40 episodes since Eros and Psyche. Like, more setup.
Well, you know, another thing, though, that's, like, not, like, consistent characterization is that you have Artemis in some panels calling Demeter, like, oh, she's a helicopter mom.
Yeah.
But then Artemis is, like, saying, hey, leave Persephone alone.
And
like,
no men allowed in the house.
Yeah, no men allowed in the house. Hades, leave her alone, you creep, blah, blah, blah. But then she calls Demeter a helicopter.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's the motivation here? Like what is her motivation? What kind of person is she? Is she like that with everybody, or is she just like that with Persephone? Does her life does her personality just revolve around Persephone? Like, because that's what it seems like a little bit.
It's supposed to be because they're both in the goddesses of eternal maidenhood, but it just comes off as inconsistent character writing.
Yeah.
And just like, oh, I need something dramatic to happen here, so I'm just gonna have her say no men allowed in the house.
Yeah.
But in the previous chapter, it's like, how come they won't let Persephone have freedom?
Yeah.
Or in the 10 chapters later, how come they won't let Persephone have freedom? And then, like, Persephone says, I have a crush on Hades, and then they do the 2-episode flashback, and then they cut back to Persephone saying, oh yeah, I have a crush on Hades, by the way.
Yeah.
So, like, she keeps doing this, where she, like, does a cliffhanger, and then the next chapter is a flashback, and then you cut back to the cliffhanger, and it's like, this is, like, 2 weeks later in real life. Eros shows up because he heard that somebody was confessing a crush. And then, tell me about it, blah, blah, blah. This is the second day, she's got a crush. Hades smells nice.
But he already assumed that she had a crush on him the very first time he showed up.
I know. So this is all rehashing.
The audience knows she has a crush on him.
I know, it's all very repetitive. It's rehashing.
It's not new information.
It's not moving the plot forward significantly at all.
65 episodes in, and it'd be like, if 65 episodes in, you said, guys, Persephone is the goddess of spring.
Seriously.
Really?
There's a cool panel in episode 65 where you see, like, Hades Poseidon, and Zeus in, like, the ancient Greek style. And then Eros and Persephone have a heart-to-heart. And he tells Persephone that actually Hades is attracted to you, and spills the tea about Minty and Hades. Oh yeah, and there's a flashback to Hades getting mad at Minty for dressing scandalously at a 7-year-old's birthday party. But anyway, I I just find this funny because later on in the series, like, Persephone's outfits change completely to match Hades' outfits, so the fact that he's, like, nitpicking Minty's outfits. But this is the scene where Hera's like, I thought I told you not to bring her, but in episode 1, she's like, where's Minty?
Mm-hmm. Well, she says she's nymph trash anyway. We didn't want her at the party anyway.
But then why was Hades trying to bring her if they just treat her so badly?
Because he wanted to propose to her. But again, it's all ad hoc, right? That's the name of that fallacy, right? Where it's like after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all after the fact that she like realizes, oh, you know, like I probably should have a reason for that. And sometimes you can pull that off. Like if you have a story that's like overly complex, sometimes you can have something happen in the story and then you take a breather and you take some time to figure it out based on what you've already set up. But it doesn't really look like that's being done with Lore Olympus so much because the explanations are not very satisfying and they just kind of raise new questions.
Yeah.
Right?
Or they're very inconsistent.
Yeah.
And then Eros here says that you're not a virgin. I can tell because I'm the god of love, which is like so gross.
Love power.
Seriously, I mean that's pretty gross.
Yeah.
The fact that virginity is like an actual thing.
Like an actual like
yeah, that you
construct,
can see.
yeah.
So anyway, then Eros is like, tell me, how did it happen? And then she confesses what happened with Apollo. And he says, you know, that was assault. And again, this is, like 40 chapters after it happened.
It's not telling us anything new.
10 months later,
Yeah.
someone finds out what happened. I would be so frustrated reading this week to week.
Yeah.
She and Eros are hanging out in his room, and there's a few panels where he doesn't have his little. He's wearing like these.
Oh yeah, like skincare masks.
Skincare masks, and he doesn't have them.
But
in a
his
few
mole
panels.
also disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He's missing his face masks in several panels.
Yeah.
At this point, there are like 3 assistants working on the series in addition to Rachel.
Yeah.
The next 3 episodes are just Persephone waking up in Eros' house, talking to Aphrodite and her children, and again, introducing more characters, introducing more setup, and it's like, why? It's just all just character interaction, you know? Like, this whole comic is just character interaction, and like...
But that's how you can tell, like, it's a hallmark of an early comic, because the only people who had made web comics, basically back in the day, especially on Tumblr, are people who have a lot of OCs, and a lot of people who follow their artwork because they like their OCs, and then they like seeing the OCs interact. So that's, like, the basis of a lot of these early web comics. That was also Todd Allison in the Petunia Violet. That was Hannah's Not a Boy's Name.
There's a lot of setup, but it's never, ever paid off.
No.
Instead, the author's like, I don't know what to do next, so let me introduce another cool OC.
Yeah.
And that, I feel like that's what's going on here. It's like, I don't know what to do next. Let me introduce all of his siblings. Episode 68 is the infamous, like, we don't let nymphs steal gods from us.
Yeah.
Pep talk from Aphrodite.
Yeah.
Even though Aphrodite is, canonically doesn't like Persephone, here she's, like, giving her a pep talk.
Yeah.
And like, oh yeah, we don't let nymphs steal gods from us. But again, like, so much time wasted. This leads to nothing. It's not like she helps Persephone.
No, but I think, like, also Aphrodite is, like, supposed to be really beautiful,
Yeah.
right? So I don't like the fact that she's got same face syndrome with, like, everybody else in the comic, right?
All of the female characters look the same, except for, like, Hecate and Minty.
Yeah. So it's like the character who's supposed to be beautiful doesn't really look very different from the main character, you know, facial features-wise. And... like Psyche was supposed to be so beautiful that her beauty rivaled that of Aphrodite's, but if you put it in black and white, she looks like Aphrodite.
There's a lot of those posts on Unpopular Lore Olympus.
Yeah.
It's like a meme to put the characters in black and white and you can't tell them apart.
Yeah. There's no, like, variation in the facial features.
At the end of episode 68, they finally bring up Psyche again after 50 chapters.
Yeah.
No, not 50. No, yeah, 50 chapters.
Yeah.
It's been 50 chapters since Psyche showed up.
Mm-hmm.
Almost a year. And then they're like, oh yeah, let's bring Psyche back. And then episode 69 is another flashback. Eros going ape and, like, killing mortals. Yeah, it's just the aftermath of Eros going ape, and it doesn't really add anything to the story.
It's a flashback, right?
It's a flashback.
And so really the only way these chapters work for the audience is if they already really like the characters.
And then we see that Aphrodite basically bribed Zeus with her body to get her son off the hook, which is, like, hashtag me too.
Yeah, I don't like this. I don't like this.
Depressing and sad. This doesn't really add anything to the story except to reveal that she turned Psyche into her little nymph assistant.
Yeah.
Again,
it feels like buying time.
It does.
Right?
It feels like stalling. It feels like there's too many panels centering around conversations that are very unnecessary.
Yeah.
You know, centering around scenes and conversations that don't matter. They don't further the story.
But you can't really talk about what does and doesn't matter because you don't
really know what the story is. Yeah. I couldn't tell you what the story of Lore Olympus is at this point if I just read these first 70 chapters. You've never read Lore Olympus before. You don't know what the story is. You couldn't tell. You couldn't tell what the story is just from the first 70 chapters.
No, if I went from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 70, I would be like, you know, what's going on here? Because Aphrodite's at the very end of chapter
70.
Well, no, I think in the first, like, 2 chapters, she's at the very end of chapter 2, I think, when he says she puts Aphrodite to shame.
Yeah.
Either chapter 2 or chapter 3. Basically, if I went from there to here, like, I wouldn't really miss anything major in the story. I could, like, continue reading. I could skip around a little bit. It's not like, oh my god, the death of a major character happened, you know, war has broken out, slave uprising, you know, there's nothing really going on like that in the story.
No, and at this point, a year and a half has passed in real life, and it's like, what's really happened?
Yeah.
I mean, like, stuff's happened, but what's the story?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's stuff happening. 6 days have passed in real life.
Yeah.
A lot of flashbacks have been introduced. A lot of characters introduced. A lot of plots are being set up, but there's no resolution. No. It's like you said, it's like you could skip and you would still be in the setup phase.
Yeah.
Like, there's still no resolution of the paparazzi thing. There's still no resolution of the eye thing.
The main character relationship still hasn't gotten together yet.
There's no resolution of the fact that Hades is already dating Minty.
No.
There's no resolution of anything. All those plot lines are just standing still and new plot lines are being added to.
Yeah. So I guess you're gonna have to see how the next 70 chapters goes then at the end of that.
Yeah. I think the next 70 chapters will get you, let's see. Dang, it gets you all the way to the end of season 1. Oh man, I'm gonna be interested to see your reaction to that. Episode 140 is like partway through season 2, but I couldn't tell you at what point in the story that is. Like, so much happens and so much of it is irrelevant.
That's kind of why you have to go chapter by chapter, at least refresh your mind with the visuals, because it all kind of blurs together.
It blurs together, and I've read it twice, and this is the 3rd time rereading it. So much happens, and like so much of it is irrelevant that I forgot that some of these characters even existed. I forgot that Eros had an entire house full of siblings. I forgot about Megara and her sisters. I forgot about all of that.
Yeah.
Because it just didn't matter.
Yeah.
In the end, in terms of the story.
Yeah. How does that play into the trial arc?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you. I actually skipped around the trial arc because I thought it was so boring. But, yeah, I mean, that's the first 70 chapters.
Oh my gosh, my ribs hurt from sitting.
Yeah. Talked about Lore Olympus so much that it's now nighttime. And you have to deal with our crappy lighting situation.
Yeah, at least there is light.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not all bad. But we just want to finish up the video here because, I mean, we've been talking basically for like 4 hours and just give our final
closing thoughts for the first 70 episodes. So you can go first because this was your first time reading it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like we were saying while we were talking. I could have skipped from like episode 3 to episode 70 and I really wouldn't have missed much. And, you know, again, instead of resolving any of the stuff that has been introduced in the story, just more stuff keeps getting added to the point where you're kind of losing track of the tone, the themes, the story, the characters, and it all just kind of blurs together there. So, yeah, that's just my impression of the first 70 chapters. You know, just it blurs together, and I couldn't really tell you one way or another where the story's going. So,
yeah, for me, rereading it was an eye-opener because, again, I've read this. This is my 3rd time reading it, and I forgot so many characters. I forgot so many plot lines that it was like, I can only conclude that the reason I forgot it was because my brain was telling me that it wasn't important. Knowing what happens next and knowing what's happening now in the story, it's like, none of this is important. You know, chapter by chapter, there's so much plot. There's so many plots being introduced, and then there's so many plots being dropped. A plot will be introduced, like Eros and Psyche in episode 17, episode 18, and then we won't return to it until episode 68. You know, it's crazy. That's, you know, a year in real time. And I know, like, Let's Play does this a lot, too. That's the other big series that I keep up with, where there's just so many characters and there's so much ambition creep and, like, scope creep in terms of the narrative, because the creator isn't really keeping track of the characters, the plot lines, the episodes that they've already written, what they've introduced, what they've set up, what they've yet to resolve, that without keeping an eye on that and without going back and rereading what you've already written, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger because you're like, I don't know what to do next. Oh, I know, I'll just introduce this aspect because I have this idea that I want to get to eventually. So I'll just introduce the setup to that idea. But it's like you have 10 other plots going on that haven't been resolved or touched on in like 10, 20, 30 episodes. Yeah, there's so many episodes that pass where, you know, Aphrodite showed up in the first 5 episodes, disappears until episode 20-something when Hades is cornering her in the parking lot, disappears until episode 60-something, 68, 69. And then, like, all of those other appearances with Aphrodite were basically scrapped so she can give Persephone a pep talk.
Yeah, but, I mean, what does the pep talk do for the story as a whole, right?
Yeah, it doesn't further the story at all. What does it do for Aphrodite's character? Nothing. What does it do for Persephone's character? Nothing. It's just cute character interaction between Aphrodite and Persephone.
Yeah, it's like, you know, a lot of people were inspired by Lore Olympus. There's a couple of works on Webtoon Canvas that are being self-published by people who openly are fans of Lore Olympus, and it's like, some of these people are like Lore Olympus fan artists who pivoted to writing their own comics, and you see the same thing in their comics, where it's like, if you've only read Lore Olympus, you're going to do the same things Lore Olympus did, and you're going to have way too many characters, and you're going to be setting things up, and then having things happen that have no setup, and
no payoff.
No payoff, and, you know, the pacing's going to be all over the place, and you might have, like, nice aesthetics, and nice art, and nice colors, but what really gets people invested in your series is the writing at the end of the day, and the story. And so, as you mentioned at the very beginning of this video and this discussion, and the whole reason, the launching off point to look at Lore Olympus critically is because now, as Season 3 is getting into the swing of things, a lot of people who read the series regularly are starting to realize that the writing is just not there.
Well, I think it's twofold. It's like the writing has never been that great, as we just covered. And then, like, now, with Season 3, at some point in Season 2, even at the end of Season 1, the art starts falling off a cliff.
Yeah.
Because right now, it's like, I read the entire, you know, first 70 chapters. It probably only took me, like, 2-3 hours to read. But the art was good enough in some sequences that I would just pause and be like, oh, well, at least that panel's really pretty.
Yeah.
You know, like, that panel's really pretty, or, you know, I really like what they did to, like, her hair in the scene. But, you know, overall, I think if you count, let's just count the number of plot lines that are going on right now.
Oh, boy.
There's Hades and Persephone.
I'm not strong enough.
There's Eros and Psyche.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Eros and Psyche. Hades and Persephone.
The goddesses of eternal maidenhood.
Yes.
There's Apollo.
Yeah.
There's who else?
There's
Minthi, yeah. Then there's Thetis and Zeus.
Yeah.
There's who else? There's the paparazzi subplot.
Yeah.
There's
Does the tutoring subplot continue or not really?
I mean, it was introduced for no real reason. So it was introduced, but nothing ever happened with it.
Okay, so you're counting that one.
There's Hermes crush on Persephone.
Yeah.
That was introduced. I mean, it was, there were like 5 or 6 panels dedicated to that, so you have to assume it was introduced for a reason, right?
And then the Meg character, right?
The Meg character's crush on Hades.
Yeah.
And, like, the Furies in general.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's also Demeter and Persephone's backstory and, like, her relationship with her mother.
Yeah.
There's the stuff that they're building up now with Hermes and Demeter keeping a secret. Why did Persephone come to the Underworld, and why did her name change from Cori to Persephone?
Yeah.
There's what else? There's Hades and Kronos, his backstory.
Yeah.
I already covered Thetis and Zeus and Hera.
Yeah.
And, like, their relationship being fractured.
Hera's ability to have visions.
Oh yeah, Hera potentially finding out that Apollo was in on it, or not in on it. Apollo was the one who assaulted Persephone.
Yeah.
And then Aphrodite and Zeus, because
Yeah.
they introduced that Aphrodite and Zeus have Eros together, but also that Aphrodite slept with Zeus to get Eros out of trouble.
Yeah.
And it's like, what was the point of introducing that if you're not going to do anything with it?
Yeah.
And that was like...
So that's 16.
That was like 16 plots in the first 70 70 panels.
I'm sure there are more.
I'm sure there are more.
I'm sure there are more.
I mean, you could count the doggy daycare thing, because you put the doggies in daycare, but he never picked them up. You know?
No.
Like, there was an entire episode where he put the dogs in daycare.
I know, but it's still been like a couple days, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It's only been a day.
It hasn't been a year.
The shades in Tartarus.
Yeah.
Why did they attack Persephone? She's a fertility goddess.
Yeah.
The shades at the beach, and how come they're not? How come they're his slaves? That's gonna come up later. Like, why do the shades have to pay to enter the underworld? Geez, that's like 19 plots. So that right there is about 19 plots.
Yeah, it's 19, but I'm sure there are more.
I'm trying to think. What else?
Does it ever become like important that the coat was given to Hestia? Because I haven't read later in the comic.
Oh my gosh. I'm not gonna say anything, but like later when we talk about the print copies, I'm sure it'll come up.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. What about... Okay, instead of trying to rack my brain with that, because my brain is like fried right now.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else to say? I mean, like... Yeah, I think, you know, I don't, like, I'm not the intended audience for this. I wouldn't pick Lore Olympus to read if I were to sit down and look through the catalog of things to read on Webtoon.
I read it because it's the most popular webtoon on Webtoon.
Yeah.
I wanted to know why it was so popular, and if you wanted to catalog the rise, I would put it down at this point to the unique art.
Yeah.
And the fact that in 2018, Webtoon was a much less crowded space, and they were advertising it heavily at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like True Beauty, Lore Olympus, and Let's Play, and like you like the Disney style, and you like the colors, because honestly, between True Beauty, Lore Olympus, and Let's Play, Lore Olympus has the best colors, and the best, like, it has the most style. It doesn't look generic at all.
It's set in a different world, too, unlike
yeah, there's a lot
two.
of fantasy elements.
Yeah.
So if I had to pick between the two, I would probably pick, or out of the three, which had the best art, I would probably pick Lore Olympus, but, you know, that's not really saying a lot.
Yeah. So
it appealed to a lot of people because of the art.
Yes.
I would say.
So it's like a compared to the other option.
Yeah, if I had to pick a series that was like Lore Olympus that does it better with fantasy elements, I would probably say
Cursed Princess Club.
Cursed Princess Club.
Yeah, it's great. It's like one of the first webtoons I read. It's also one of the few that I had to binge aggressively, and that one I could actually read and like, okay, what happens next? What happens next? And there's like setup and payoff.
There's a large cast of characters.
Big cast of characters, and she balances it so well.
It's a fantasy setting.
Yeah, fantasy setting. It's like humorous, and there's romance, and it's cute and character.
Wholesome.
Very wholesome. It's not sleazy like Lore Olympus. Lore Olympus has like some sleaze. It's gross. It makes you feel gross. Some of the stuff is like, oh man, really? You know, what? You know? So, yeah, Cursed Princess Club is really good. I like it.
Yeah, Lore Olympus, some of the scenes, some of the like stuff that is focused on is just kind of, it doesn't have the best implications.
Yeah, not the best implications, but it's like, you know, I mean, you know, saying stuff like her heart-shaped butt and she's so tiny, how would you guys even do it? Like those kinds of things, it's just like, really? Like, who is this for? You know? And that's why I question, like, if they adapted it, who would be interested in watching that? Because it's like you said, everybody who watches those Let's Play the anime on YouTube, the best anime of all time, is like, oh my god, this is horrible when it's animated.
When you actually read it out loud and
Yeah.
you're forced to think about what's happening, it's a different story. It's
Yeah.
a very different story.
Yeah, but okay, with that being said, you know, that was the first 70 episodes. I'm done talking about Lore Olympus for today.
I have nothing else to add. I
Yeah.
think we'll get into it in the next video. I don't know if we'll be covering 70 episodes. This was hard, man.
It was grueling.
It was very grueling.
I felt like I was repeating myself a lot. We just kept coming back to the same things of her, like, not pacing the story correctly. And, like, it's been, you know, 68 years in real life, but only 1 hour in the comic. You know?
Yeah, it's like Inception.
Yeah. Or, like, Interstellar when Romilly comes out
Yeah.
and he's like, guys.
Black hole time.
It's been 40 years. I started cycling through cryo sleep.
No, I mean, there's just, you know, if I had to count the number of episodes that add nothing to the story, and like the number of panel, you know, going back to the assault, and then the amount of time spent on Hades' POV versus Persephone's, there's so many wasted panels. There's so many wasted episodes. there's no real story, you know, coalescing, and it's been a year in real time.
Yeah, that's why you can't say like which ones are story relevant and which ones aren't, because from what I hear from the people who are dissatisfied with where the story is going, from like the little snippets that I've heard about how it shapes up, it's like, okay, but where did that come from? Like, none of that. And I guess you could like pick and choose little things, but then there's a whole controversy about like retconning, right? Which we don't, like, I really want to stop talking about it, because now we're getting into a whole other thing that's going to have to be talked about later.
Yeah, we're just going to tackle all of that in future episodes.
Yeah, so let's just cut this off here, because we're already at 4 hours of recording.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to have to edit that down, get rid of the dead time, and then, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's it.